If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41, Almost There. I watched as Mukid reformed again after being hit by my water dragon jutsu. He had left his shell? Skin? To dodge my great fireball and was now jumping around in his spider body. I wonder if he really liked spiders, because having the choice to make yourself into anything and picking a giant spider was kinda weird. Do you think his rant was interrupted by Minato smashing a raised nan into him, destroying him once again. Hey, good job Minato, I gave him a thumbs up before weaving some hand signs. Water style, water severing wave. A beam of water cut the floating pieces of Mukid apart before they could converge again. Lightning style, false darkness. Seems like Minato is picking up what I'm putting down. As the Mukid pieces tried to gather again, a bolt of lightning struck them before they could get close enough. We continued this little dance for a couple more times before Mukid realized he was just getting picked apart. All the broken puppets in the room split apart into smaller pieces, creating a storm of wood and metal around Mukid's spider body. It assembled himself a giant wooden centipede thing, a humanoid upper body with two thick arms attached to a segmented lower body, basically a centipede centaur. You insignificant gnats! Stop interfering! He roared out as the massive thing turned towards us. You're just delaying the inevitable. Chse! Minato yelled out. The Akimichi responded immediately, jumping off from a pillar nearby and using his partial expansion jutsu on one of his hands, slamming down into the puppet with earth-shattering force. It didn't really do much besides slightly crack the surface of it. I yelled out to Minato. Can you stall him for a few minutes? I have something that will stop him. He nodded sharply, and then he disappeared in a flash of yellow light. I immediately sat down. And did nothing. Actually, I summoned some lights around my sitting body. Wouldn't want Minato to think I'm just sitting here doing nothing. Come on, Minato, show me that good stuff. About 5 minutes later, and I think I saw everything I needed to see. Shibi and Chisa had joined in on the fighting again after a short break, using their respective abilities to distract Mukid and stop his attacks. Naruto and Sarah were done with freeing all the people, and they were both running towards something now. Guess they were going to close the Rimayaku? The important thing, though, was that Minato really did show me what I needed. I got a good look at the raised nan and a good variety of elemental jutsu. I recorded it all, of course. Once I get back, I'll transcribe it into scrolls and add it to Wave's jutsu library. Sadly, not truly destructive since Mukid wasn't allowing anyone time to prepare, but I was happy with jutsu he used. It would give me some much needed kick to my jutsu, once I practiced them, of course. Time for me to actually do something. I clasped my hands together and prayed out loud. O Watcher behind the stars, please allow me to wield your divine weapon. O Watcher behind the stars, grant me your might. O Watcher behind the stars, guide my hand. A starlight spear appeared in my grasp, void black with golden stars dotting its surface. It didn't actually have any powers, it just looked fancy. I just needed something that looked distracting so anyone watching didn't realize I could just do things at will. A good inspirational story doesn't have the problem be wiped away with the wave of a hand. It needed a bit of drama to really stay in people's minds, it would hit all the harder. With that, I jumped towards Mukid, screaming out an order to Minato. Keep him still for a moment. The future Yandere disappeared in another flash of yellow light before reappearing next to Mukid, thrusting a Hiroshin kunao into his giant wooden chest. Writing in the ceiling language started to spread over Mukid. The puppet froze as the seal took hold, not allowing him to move an inch. I threw my spear straight at him, the tip piercing through the giant puppet and nailing Mukid himself through his smaller chest. The seal broke immediately afterwards, but Mukid still didn't move. I was using some DP to make sure he stayed put. This time I didn't use an illusion, or directly restrain him, just made the layer of air around him as immovable as possible. If he wanted to break free, he would have to lift the equivalent of a building with one arm. Since this only applied to his small body, it probably wasn't possible. I wanted to know what kind of bullshit would he used if he really could lift a building with an arm without it snapping. Of course, he could still technically use puppets, but I made sure his connection to his strings was cut too. I had spent a pretty good amount of DP by this point. This little side adventure was turning out to be more expensive than I thought it would be. But it would still be worth it if my plan worked. Still, I'll have to keep an eye on my stores until I get back and can restock. Keep an eye on him. I don't know how it will interact with the massive amounts of chakra he can channel. Until Sarah closes the Rimayaku, we need to make sure that Mukabe is contained. I told Minato once I landed next to him. He nodded in reply. Well, would you look at that, somehow my voice carried just the right way, and Mukabe heard it. Wonder how that happened. And after a minute of struggling without effect, his chakra strings were no longer being cut as soon as they appeared. Wonder why. Guess we will have a climatic final stand in front of the Rimyaku, the noble princess barely succeeding in closing it with the help of an inspiring sacrifice by me. How unexpected. The giant puppet twitched. Get back. He's overpowering my spear. I yelled out as I jumped back, the others quickly following my lead. Mukabe giant form started moving, trashing around. I was only allowing him to use a few strings to sell the illusion, so his movements were erratic and jerky, but he still managed to turn around and smash through a wall. He would slowly break free. Thought he needed to be in top shape for the finale after all. Chapter 42, Gaslighting finished, Disengage protocols. Sarah pushed at the door to the source of the Rimyaku. Behind her, Naruto stood guard, his eyes searching for any possible threats. She was glad that he had shown up. Without dozens of him running around helping her free everyone, it would have taken much longer. She knew that Osamu and the others were fighting Mukabe. She knew they were risking their lives to stop her mistake. She needed to close the Rimyaku. There were so many people depending on her now, but this damn door won't open. Open, damn you! She cried out as she pushed against the doors with all of her might. Nothing happened. The door didn't budge an inch. Her mother had never taught her how to open the door. She just said it was something that Sarah would learn when she grew older. No. She refused. She focused on the inner strength that she felt within herself, the blessing bestowed upon her by the Watcher behind the stars. Golden lightning started enveloping her body once again. Sarah's fist slammed into the doors, leaving a crack where it landed. Again and again, she hit the door with all of her power. Her knuckles started bleeding as the skin broke from the force of her punches. But she kept hitting. It took several more hits before the stone door finally gave in, shattering apart as the rock crumbled away. The Rimyaku lay exposed, the eye at the center fully open, power being siphoned into the ceiling by Mukabe. She rushed forwards across the bridge leading to the center, towards the eye, ignoring the pain in her hand. It was bleeding from the ripped skin, dripping onto the ground below. Her goal was in sight, just a little bit more. She knelt on the ground in front of the eye, looking at it as she ignored everything else. She needed to focus. Osamu was counting on her, so were all the people of Rin, who were finally safe from his grip. As she put her hands on the eye, a glowing iris appeared within it, focusing on her. Then Mukabe came crashing through the wall. No! I won't let you stop me! He roared out as his belly opened, revealing a metal cannon that started gathering chakra. Naruto cried out something that Sarah didn't hear. She glanced up at Mukabe and the cannon pointing directly at her. But she didn't move, all of her concentration on trying to close the Rimyaku. Please work. Please. The beam of pure chakra shot straight towards her, faster than anyone could react. Naruto tried to reach her, but he was too far away. Osamu appeared in between them, moving so fast it looked like he teleported to Sarah's eyes, arms crossed in front of himself as he braced against the beam. It exploded in a flash of light. When she could see again, Osamu stood there, the skin and flesh on his arms vaporized, revealing white bone underneath, burns covering his chest and stomach, clothes ragged and burned. But he was still standing. Hey, Sarah, he spoke up. Looks like I arrived just in time. With those words, he fell down. No. A scream ripped itself from her throat, tears building in her eyes. But she didn't move, all of her concentration on trying to close the Rimyaku. After a moment that seemed like an eternity, the eye closed itself. The Rimyaku retreated back into its stone prison, the purple chakra fading from the room. She forced herself to look at Osamu's body, seeing the slight rise and fall of his chest. He was still alive. Letting out a sigh of relief, she looked towards Mukabe. The puppet he had assembled was being slowly broken apart by the Konoha ninja and Naruto. Without the Rimyaku to sustain him, he could not regenerate, and a big puppet was something that wasn't good enough to fight someone on the level of Minato and 3 other shinobi. Her attention focused back on Osamu. She rushed towards him, picking him up as gently as she could and hugging him against her chest. Her blessing gave her enough strength to easily lift him. His eyes opened weakly, staring up at her. Looks like we succeeded, he said softly. You're worthy of my God's blessing, after all. He took a shaky breath. Don't worry about me. The Watcher is watching over me. Here, in case we don't get to talk again. He weakly reached into his pocket, pulling out a small green notebook before handing it to Sarah. This contains everything I know about the Watcher. He trailed off slightly, taking another deep breath. Osamu closed his eyes again, his breath slowly coming out. Sarah glanced at his chest. It was still moving. He was still alive. She held him tightly to her chest, for a moment longer before letting go. She gently lowered him onto the ground, giving him one last look before standing up. She looked back towards the battle that was going on with Mukid. Lightning covered her form again. With a scream, she flew forwards, leaving a trail of golden lightning behind her. Mukid's head exploded from her kick. There was still one thing to do. I watched as everyone jumped Mukid. He may have been dangerous, but once his main gimmick was gone, he just got wrecked. First came Sarah, smashing through his head like a golden comet. Minato and Naruto quickly followed up, smashing their combined raise nan into Mukid's puppet body. He still did the whole spite-powered dive into the source of Rimyaku, which I didn't bother to stop. More time was only going to lessen the impact of this whole situation. Minato quickly dealt with that though, sealing the Rimyaku away for good. He also did the whole memory wipe thing, leaving me and Naruto out of it, though. I was wondering how he did it, but the answer turned out to be seals. It was always seals. Fucking seal masters. Seems like Minato took what I said to him seriously. Instead of erasing Naruto's memory, he owned up to the fact that he was his father. Naruto, I won't remember this, but you will, so I want you to know that I am proud of you, and I'm sure your mother would be too. Minato spoke quietly to his son. I love you. Dad. Naruto sniffled, now glowing slightly. I love you too. Guys, you are having this moment next to my unconscious body. I know I had like one conversation with Naruto and told Minato he was an arrogant little shit, but have some tact. At least Sarah was showing concern, trying to bandage up my wounds. The glow suddenly increased in brightness, engulfing my human body and Naruto completely, along with everything else. I braced myself, and I was greeted by the same sense of vertigo before I found myself back in the void. This time filled with the Crow Island, the Star Eaters' homes. I spent some DP healing up Osamu's body. I already could feel a group of worshippers that didn't exist before. Looks like my little plan worked. I was not expecting them to number in the thousands. Tough. Looks like Sarah did a good job. What the hell is going on? A slightly transparent Naruto yelled out, jump scaring me a little bit. His eyes still a little bit teary from his talk with Minato. What the fuck? He wasn't supposed to be here. We are like 2 years before he time travels in the original timeline. Wait, why was he just a soul? Where was his body? Did I accidentally kill the protagonist? Before I even had time to do anything, something yanked Naruto away at an insane speed. Hhhhhhhh. His surprised screaming faded into the distance. What the fuck? I am perplexed. Chapter 43, Aftermath Part 1. Naruto was zooming across the elemental nations, only seeing a blur of colors, everything being too fast for him to process. Before suddenly slamming into someone. A younger Naruto woke up from his nap with a gasp, clutching his chest. He was napping in a field while Jiraiya was writing his boring reports. His head hurt, new? Old? Memories, swirling inside it, trying to settle down. He remembered going to Rin, saving the people of Rin and fighting Anro-Kyuzen. But he also remembered Pervy Sage telling him to entertain himself for a bit because he had work to do. Wait. Pervy Sage. He jumped up and started running. Pervy Sage. The Toad Sage glanced over at Naruto's shout. He noticed the teary expression on his face and was very confused. Wasn't he napping? Naruto jumped and hugged him tightly. Tears were flowing from his eyes as he held onto him. Naruto was very confused. He didn't really understand what happened. His head was a jumbled mess, but Jiraiya was alive again. That's all that mattered. Even if he was shorter now, and he remembered things that didn't happen, like fighting Haku, he never even met Haku. The only thing that happened in Wave was that he found out the Uzumaki were a clan and learned about his new idols, Kushina Uzumaki and Mina. 2. His grip on Jiraiya tightened. Arg, Naruto, you're squeezing a bit too hard. Jiraiya choked out, surprised by the strength of his hug. He had asked Old Man Hokage about him, and Kakashi, and Jiraiya had even bragged that he had taught him. Why did none of them ever mention that Minato was his dad? Pervy sage. Naruto started seriously, his grip getting even tighter. He had been traveling with Jiraiya for months now, and he spoke a lot about Minato and Kushina when they were having lessons about sealing. But not once had he mentioned that Minato was his dad. He could worry about his weird memories later, he had something to do first. Why yes. Jiraiya croaked out. I am going to beat you up. What? Naruto suplexed him. 20 years ago. After the Konoha ninja defeated Anrokuzen and sealed away the Rimyaku once again, Rin began to heal. People looked at the princess with fondness now, a small minority resented her, but most understood that she was being misled just as much as they were. Nobody remembered a boy named Naruto helping to free them, or a man named Osamu fighting against the evil advisor. It took a few days for the Konoha shinobi to leave, and when they did, the princess herself saw them off. That very night, the contingency placed on her activated, and memories rushed into her head, of Osamu, of the Watcher behind the stars, of Naruto and everything else. She spent the whole night reading the green notebook she had found amongst her possessions days before. It talked about a weird god, who was deep asleep. At the time she put it in a corner of her room, for some reason she was reluctant to get rid of it even if she thought it was nonsense. But now, with her new memories, she read it again, and again. This time understanding what it spoke of. She raised her hand, golden lightning surrounded it for a second before vanishing again. The Watcher would be honored, both as a thanks for giving her this strength and because of her promise to Osamu. 19 years ago. Sarah watched as a giant four-tailed monkey was slammed into her city by a man covered in lightning. Her fists were clenched tightly at her side. In a short few days, Rin had turned into a battlefield. Iwa wanted to form an alliance. She knew they had only wanted a staging point for their invasion of the Land of Wind. She was about to deny them, but Kumo had caught wind of this and sent an assassination squad to kill their representatives. That was 6 days ago. Then, in a series of reinforcements and counter-reinforcement that kept pouring out of the Land of Rain, Rin had become a battlefield, each nation uncaring of the damage they were inflicting. Sarah had managed to evacuate the citizens, but the city itself was being destroyed. Once she felt the oppressive chakra of a tailed beast, she knew that there would be little left. This was being confirmed right at this moment, the Raikage using a tower as a jumping point to propel himself towards the Yonbai. She felt her nails break the skin on her palm, blood now slowly dripping on the ground. But she forced herself to turn away, her people needed her. 9 years ago. Come on, we know you're hiding the Queen of Thunder, if you don't tell us where she is then. The Suna missing nin said threateningly as he pressed his blade against the old man's throat. The rumors said she was sick, and the black market bounty was too good to pass up. There was no way they were going to let their chance at 10 million RY slip through their hands. Many were very interested in learning what technique allowed her to use that lightning chakra cloak while hiding her chakra, and she had made quite a few enemies over the years. The people of Rin had become wandering nomads. They had been scouting the Rin caravan for a while now, and they were certain that it held the Queen of Thunder. But after searching the biggest wagons, they found nothing. We told you. The old man said softly, eyes filled with determination. We don't know what you are talking about. Before the ex-Suna shinobi could react, a golden lightning-covered hand ripped his head off. My queen! The old man called out in surprise. You should be resting. Sarah smiled slightly, but she looked pale. I can't rest if my people are threatened. She said weakly as the remaining missing nin started attacking her. They didn't last a minute. She had trained diligently when she realized that she was the only one strong enough to stop shinobi from preying on her people. She may have lacked a teacher in the shinobi arts, but training her body only required will and time. Combined with the increased speed and strength from her blessing, she was more than enough to handle some overconfident missing nin. Please my queen. You can't keep pushing yourself like this. The doctors said after the birth that you should rest as much as possible. He pleaded. Sarah chuckled softly. She had given birth 3 years ago, resting didn't make her get better. Her doctors confided in her after the birth that Sarah should be crippled, doomed to a maybe half a decade of life, but somehow she continued to live. Every year, the doctors were more and more baffled and relieved that didn't just fall over and die. But Sarah knew why, she knew what caused it. It was her blessing, it increased her vitality, pushing back the sickness attempting to claim her. But she could feel it, the blessing slowly being overwhelmed. She hoped she still had enough time to see her daughter grow up. Chapter 44, Aftermath Part 2. 1 year ago. Sarah felt weak, Her breaths were small rattling things. Her strength was sapped away from her body. She was sitting in her palanquin on a hill, overlooking the Ren caravan as it celebrated the annual Watchers Festival. Her friends had noticed that every year she spent a day honoring someone. Once she explained that it was a man named Osamu and his, now her, god, who helped her save Ren. They had started doing so too. Eventually, more and more people joined in, and now almost 16 years after it started, the whole caravan did as well. It had brought her a lot of joy to see everyone celebrating her new god and Osamu's sacrifice. She still didn't understand what happened to him and Naruto, and the years later were too turbulent to leave her people. Now she was too weak to attempt the trip to Konoha. The fourth Hokage was long dead anyway. He was the only one in that chamber besides her and the two that disappeared. "Mom!" a young girl yelled as she ran up the hill. "Look what I made!" She showed off a little paper star covered with gold paint. Sarah smiled at her daughter as she sat down next to her and started babbling about the festival. Himiko was 12 years old already. Where did the time go? She knew her daughter was putting up a strong face almost constantly, knowing that Sarah herself would be gone soon. Sarah relaxed in her seat as Himiko rambled on about the festival. She might feel bitter about her weakening body, but she can't say she regrets the life she has lived. Present day. Sarah's eyes could barely stay open, she could barely move her limbs, every breath was harder than the last one. Days were passing her by at this point. She blinked and the room changed. Himiko was there a lot of the time, her voice slowly droning on as she talked to Sarah, trying to keep her awake as much as possible. Sometimes she spoke of the caravan, sometimes it was just things that happened during her day. "Ah, I suppose I should apologize, it seems that the blessing caused you a lot of suffering." A spike of adrenaline shot through Sarah's body. A man stood beside her bed. Osamu. Just like she remembered, the burns she last saw on him gone, wearing the same outfit he had on when they met. He looked at Sarah with a sad smile. "No." She said weakly. She wanted to say much, but her weakened state and failing voice betrayed her. Osamu took a seat next to her bed, gently taking her hand in his own. "I don't regret it." Every word was exhausting, she struggled to push them out. "I know, I'm sorry for your suffering all the same." He responded softly, squeezing her hand slightly. "But, why are you acting like you are about to die? You still have a lot of time left." What? She whispered confused. Osamu grinned as he clasped his hands together. "A watcher behind the stars." He intoned solemnly, a pressure descending on the room. "Please grant this faithful follower her reward." His eyes started glowing golden as the room shook from the power surging inside it. In a split second, the bed disappeared, the room disappeared, Sarah's body was floating in the void. Before her, the watcher beyond the stars watched over her silently. Golden eyes peering into her soul. No longer the sleeping giant she had met all those years ago, now fully awake and focused on her. His hand reached out, a single finger poking her in the chest. "Be healed." The pain and weakness fled, leaving her as strong as she had been before falling sick. And then she found herself back in her bed. Her body brimming with strength, even more so than when she was young. "You're only, what? 36? 37? Osamu questioned. "Way too young to die." He turned to face Sarah and bowed. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've done far more for us than anyone could have expected, you can relax now." Sarah looked at him, confusion coloring her expression. Osamu straightened up again and walked to the door leading out of her bedroom. "Wait!" she called out, scrambling off the bed to run after him, but her legs gave out. She forgot how long it had been since she last stood up. Even if her body was healed, it would take a bit longer to get used to walking again. As she got up and stumbled out of her room, Osamu was gone. That left a bad taste in my mouth, not the running away part. I did not know how to deal with reunions. I meant Sarah's life, it was full of hardship, she had earned a peaceful retirement many times over, I was expecting a few hundred worshippers, she had converted thousands of people. From what little I saw, the people lived a happy life, even if they never had the wealth or manpower to resettle Ren, at least it didn't look like their life was particularly miserable either. But Sarah got fucked over, her blessing only served to extend her suffering. The world was unfair, it was uncaring of efforts and morals. You could be the hardest working person in the world, only for some asshole to murder you on the street, and then they turn around and win the lottery. But I was a god, fuck the world being unfair, as long as I had the power, people would be rewarded for their efforts. She deserved a happy life with her daughter and people, so that's what she will get, no more weakness or pain, she will have all the time in the world to enjoy life now. So I fixed everything, rejuvenated body and healed up to tip-top shape. I hope she takes a seat back and relaxes for now. I'll send one of the Star Eaters to watch over the people of Ren from now on. And Wave will be sending a group of laborers and raw materials, for fellow faithful they would be happy too. They deserve some help after all the shit that happened to them. It hammered home the point that being a god means you can't afford to half-ass caring for your people, everything needs to be handled with the proper amount of attention and care. Still, besides that little hiccup, this whole adventure was a success. I got some jutsu, a skin of the arguably most talented shinobi that didn't have a bloodline, about a 20% increase in my worshipper count, and another community of worshippers outside of Wave. And all it cost me was a lot of DP. And potentially killing the protagonist, I still wasn't sure what that was about. I really should check on that. Chapter 45, The World's Turning, The Fire's Burning. Haruka was having an emergency meeting. It was a power only the department heads had, and only to be used when something world-changing happened, or a threat to the Order of the Watcher was discovered. And Hikari had called it, which was worrying. The head of the intelligence wing calling an emergency meeting most certainly meant either something big had happened outside of Wave or Wave was being threatened by an enemy. Kenji was the first to show up, technically not a head of a wing, but he was an important enough figure in the order that he had an honorary place in meetings such as this one. Kazuo was the second to show up, then Zabuza, recently promoted to the head of the military wing. They all exchanged greetings before taking their seats, sitting in silence waiting for Hikari. "So how is everyone?" Kenji asked casually. "It's been a while since we sat down and talked like this." Haruka didn't bother hiding her amused smile. "What the hell are you talking about, Kenji?" Kazuo responded gruffly. "We all meet last week. That was so long ago." Kenji defended himself. "How am I supposed to know what my precious friends are going through if I don't talk with them every day?" Zabuza sighed heavily as Haruka laughed, while Kazuo glared at the grinning man. Before anyone could respond, Hikari finally arrived, quickly sitting down. "I apologize for being late," she said sharply. "I needed to make sure the information we have is accurate." "What is it?" Haruka asked seriously. Everyone else sat up a bit straighter as well. "The Land of Fire has a new lake, 4 mountains are missing, and there is a new moon floating on the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Rain." Silence filled the meeting room. "A new moon," Zabuza said slowly. Hikari nodded. "It appeared out of nowhere a couple days ago, not quite as big as the original moon, but large enough to be seen from most of the mainland." "What about the 4 mountains? Where did they go?" Zabuza continued. "Well, they and the land that was occupying the new lake are what's making up the new moon." There were a few seconds of silence. "What the fuck?" Kazuo said bluntly. Haruka's thoughts mirrored his words. "I seem to have misplaced a Naruto. I found the younger one, you know, the one that was alive and didn't time travel. I used some DP to try to find Naruto, which I realized was not really what I needed after it showed me the littler blonde. He was in the middle of a spirited spar with Jiraiya. Well, spar, it was more Naruto angrily chasing Jiraiya around trying to beat him up while the older man ran away. So then I used some DP to attempt to find the same Naruto that disappeared, and got 0 hits. He's disappeared into the ether, I guess. Maybe he moved on to the Pure Lands, maybe the Sage of 6 Paths kidnapped him, I don't know. Waste of DP honestly. I think I will finish up transcribing my knowledge of the jutsu Minato used, and then just turn my brain off and mindlessly train for a bit." Creator Yatagarasu's voice interrupted my grumbling. "Oh, hey Yata. What's up?" I responded almost instantly. I always had time for my favorite creations. "I suspect that the confrontation between Obito Uchiha and Nagato Uzumaki has happened." "Well, unless they fought in Wave itself, I assume something big happened in the outside lands." "What happened?" "A small moon has appeared above the Land of Fire, on the border with the Land of Rain, and a large amount of land is missing. I suspect Nagato has used the Chibaku Tensei. I decided to take a look myself, using some DP to check out what's happening there." "Yup, that was a Chibaku Tensei all right. Is the order planning to do anything?" I questioned idly as I continued to watch. "They wish to petition me for answers, as a threat that could destroy Wave has appeared, but other than that they are not planning anything. Right. Tell them what you think is relevant, you have all the information. I thought to Yatagarasu before continuing. Just make sure to keep an eye on things, this could destabilize the continent if Nagato or Obito decide to go on a rampage. Although, I'm pretty sure Nagato's plan will look very different from the one he had in the original timeline. If he survived, of course, his one disadvantage was his endurance, and Obito was in a perfect position to take advantage of that weakness with his half-zetsu body and Manjikao Sharingan. Very well, thank you for your time, creator. Honestly, my kids were far too polite. Oh, wait a second, there's one more thing before I let you go. I quickly said before he left. Tell Haruka to organize a group to go to Rin, my efforts succeeded, and it's time for the order to use some of that prosperity to help out, Rin deserves to be rebuilt. Yatagarasu was quiet for a few seconds. Creator, could I participate in the rebuilding of Rin? Yatagarasu questioned curiously. I wish to learn architecture. I blinked in surprise. Architecture? Well, if he wanted to make buildings. I don't see why not, just make sure to be mindful, they might treat your words as commands if you aren't careful. If Yatagarasu wanted to become an architect in his spare time, who was I to stop him? We need to change plans. Black Zetsu spoke up once Obito finished merging with the white Zetsu. He was now mostly Zetsu flesh, only the upper left part of his face not being the pale shade of white. The fight was much closer than it should have been, with only the intervention of Black Zetsu preventing Obito from being crushed inside the Chibaku Tensei. Obito pushed back the absolute rage he was feeling. Nagato had managed to undo years of planning, Akatsuki was salvageable, but without a Rinnegan user all their plans would be stymied. What do you suggest? He questioned evenly, his tone cold and harsh. The original plan is dead, we would need to find another Uzumaki to replace Nagato. That would take time he technically had, but every year that passed meant one more variable that could appear and ruin everything. Especially since the current crop of Jinchuriki were almost perfect in terms of how easy they would be to capture. The only one that required some thought was the Haxabi, his host being the brother of the Raikage made capturing him problematic. Everyone else was too weak or too isolated, the Rokubai showed that they had to be expedient, if any of the tailed beasts died and reformed somewhere else, then it could take years to find them again. We technically don't need the whole tailed beast. Black Zetsu stated slowly, as if he was thinking over his words before speaking. All we need is enough of their chakra to recreate the 10 tails. Obito narrowed his eyes. If you have a plan, speak it now. He hissed out impatiently. We could use your new body to its fullest, it is a superb Rinnegan host due to the white Zetsu flesh, we could steal only a part of the chakra of the Jinchuriki, and then, once you become the Juhobi's Jinchuriki, use its power to drain them dry. Black Zetsu stated as blankly as he could. Maybe if Obito was less angry, he would have noticed the hidden glee that Zetsu spoke with. It would mean that we need a massive source of chakra to make up for the lack of the full-tailed beasts, but there are ways of acquiring that kind of power. Black Zetsu continued. That was not a terrible plan, it was risky, relying on the diminished power of the Juhobi being enough to overwhelm the Jinchuriki once he was ready to cast the infinite Tsukuyomi, but it meant they could prioritize stealth and speed. With his Sharingan, he might be able to gather most of the tailed beast chakra to revive the Juhobi without anyone noticing. He would start with the younger Jinchuriki, they were the least likely to resist his genjutsu. Obito stared at the jar containing the Rinnegan, contemplating his options. Chapter 46, Plots and Plans. 3 hours later. Zetsu was moving through the ground, he, in contrast to Obito, was giddy with glee at this outcome, while losing Nagato was unexpected. Obito was now almost fully made up of white Zetsu flesh, and once he implanted the Rinnegan into him, he would be an almost perfect vessel for Mother. More than that, he had access to Obito for hours while he was unconscious from his injuries. Black Zetsu had taken some creative liberties with the white Zetsu he had used, a little seed was planted deep. All he had to do was find a source of chakra large enough to serve as a replacement for the incomplete tailed beasts, but that shouldn't be too difficult, he knew of many different places where chakra could be found. 1,000 years of life meant he knew secrets hidden beyond anyone's reach. It grated at him that he would not be able to resurrect Mother at full power, but this new plan removed the variable that was Madara, and left Obito very vulnerable to betrayal. The part of the plan he always disliked was the reliance on Madara and Obito, they were both willful people with sharp intuition, making an early resurrection risky. He had always prioritized patience over speed. Over the centuries of manipulation, he learned that the most successful attempts relied on people who thought that their own plans were being put in motion. The times when he revealed himself did not end well. Indra's reincarnations always had a tendency to go out in a blaze of spite if they found out about his manipulations. But now Obito was being slowly shaped into a perfect vessel, unaware that his new flesh would be his doom. As long as he wasn't foolish, and played his cards right, he could set up a situation where Obito would become a sacrificial lamb for Mother without triggering a war full of new variables and complications. Black Zetsu wanted to laugh. After 1,000 years of failed plans upon failed plans, he finally had some good fortune. Mother's resurrection was in sight, finally, after so long. But before he got too excited, he needed a way to store the collected chakra. And he had a way to create an army of bodies that could learn how to draw seals. Seals that could store chakra. 2 weeks later, Sarah was looking over the caravan. From her hilltop perch, she could see everyone preparing for departure. It was time to move on again. Himiko was sitting next to her, eyes also glued to the people below them. Her daughter had spent almost every waking moment by her side, even when the news of her recovery had spread through the camp like wildfire and an almost week-long festival had started. She understood. Sarah herself did the same when Himiko was born. Any second she was not in the same room as her, she would have an irrational fear that Himiko would just disappear into thin air. She was interrupted from her quiet enjoyments of the festivities below her by a dark shape flying over the horizon. Sarah instantly stood up, recognizing the being flying towards them. It was one of those Star Eaters her notebook mentioned. There was little else that looked the same: a large wingless body, the head of a crow, 3 golden eyes. Himiko's startled gasp meant she was not the only one to see the strange being. She put a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. It landed gracefully in front of the palanquin Sarah had been sitting in, its massive size dwarfing her own. She bowed at the waist deeply, but prepared herself. Her people's safety came first, and with shinobi running around every corner, this Star Eater could be an imposter, even if it seemed unlikely. Greetings. The creature's voice was deep, but polite. My name is Yatagarasu. I am here to inform you that Rin will be rebuilt. Sarah straightened up and stared at Yatagarasu in surprise. Her earlier suspicions slapped out of her head by the unexpected declaration. Rin? Rebuilt? She felt hope bubbling up within herself as she looked Yatagarasu in its eyes. It wasn't joking. It was a dream she had many times, but logistically it never worked. They lacked the raw materials needed to do so, and without the constant moving they did they would run out of food due to the Land of Wind's harsh climate. A part of her wanted to accept the words as they were said, but her responsibility to her people kept her from doing so. How would we feed ourselves? She questioned intently. Yatagarasu tilted its head and let out a thrill. She thought it sounded approving. A caravan is leaving the Land of Waves at this very moment. It will be loaded 200 tons of food, enough to feed your people until the new farmland is established. Regular expeditions will also be sent out. Yatagarasu and Sarah talked for quite a while. Even Himiko's awe had faded after the first half an hour of logistical planning. But eventually, she was satisfied. Sarah gathered her people. They stood before her as she prepared to make an announcement. She reinforced her throat with the blessing granted to her by the Watcher, a trick she had figured out years ago. My people. Her voice boomed across the entire caravan. It is time to return to Rin. Our homeland will be reborn. A cheer went up amongst the crowd. Many happy tears were shed at the proclamation. Most here remembered Rin as it was before it became a ruin. For some they had lived in Rin for decades, for others it was a childhood memory that faded with time. But all of them held the dream of returning, that they had a place to belong, and now that dream would come true. Haruka looked over the gathered expedition crew, 1,000 strong, some of the best workers Wave had to offer. Their job was simple, but monumental. They needed to rebuild a city that had fallen into ruin. She was just waiting for the final confirmation. Thankfully, even thought the message was late, she saw a crow descend from the sky towards her. She recognized this one of the younger members of the Crow clan. He loved flying, and thus was tasked many times with bringing messages back and forth. If he was here, then Shun must have received a response from Yatagarasu about the status of Rin. As he landed on her offered arm, he chirped happily as she stroked his head. So, what is the news? The Queen of Rin accepts the Watcher's offer. She will lead her people back to their homeland. The crow spoke in the most serious voice he could, which wasn't very serious at all. He was much too small for that. Good work. Haruka complimented him. Now go have some fun. you've waited around enough for today. The crow nodded with another chirp before flying off. Haruka turned to face the expedition crew and whistled loudly to gain everyone's attention. Everyone, our brothers and sisters across the sea have accepted our aid. Rin shall be rebuilt. She announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear her. A loud cheer went up amongst the assembled people. They had been waiting for the confirmation for a while now, and they were excited to finally leave. The caravan started slowly moving, loaded up with food and building materials and surrounded by almost 100 initiates and almost a dozen acolytes. Enough to protect it from anything short of a war. As the procession left Wave, Haruka felt satisfaction flow through her. Wave really had changed. Even before Gat's takeover, a group like this could have never happened. But now it was a mild expense, not even putting a strain on their food or money. Wave really progressed so much in so little time. Praise the Watcher. Those words were echoed by everyone who heard them. How could anyone not? Without him, Wave would still be languishing in its own misery, at the mercy of those more powerful than it. Creator's thoughts. Valerian writer. Alright, I have decided what the conditions are for Kagaya's resurrection. 1. The statue, it's the body of the 10 tails and thus also Kagaya's body. 2. A good amount of chakra from every tailed beast. You don't need the whole beast, as shown in the Og timeline where they only used part of Kurama and Jayaki. 3. A compatible body, need to be as close to an Satsuki body as possible. Obito qualifies due to being a Uchiha with Hashirama-based flesh and a Rinnegan. 4. A massive source of chakra, in canon this was the chakra drained from the people trapped by the infinite Tsukuyomi. 5. You need to awaken the sleeping consciousness of Kagaya. Zetsu was the one that did it in the Og timeline when he took over Madara. I will probably find a random comment by Kishimoto tomorrow from 11 years ago invalidating one of these requirements or adding a new one. Chapter 47, Time Skip, again. 2 months later. Naruto was training hard. After a long talk about his father and mother with Jiraiya and how Naruto found out about them, he was absolutely determined to become Hokage. Thankfully his memories settled down, so now he had the normal amount of thoughts in his head again. But they also left him with a bunch of extra skills he hadn't had before. The older Naruto had spent a lot of time working on the basics, so he didn't learn many new ninjutsu, but older Naruto had created something that he thought was very cool. Something called Rasen Shuriken, but it was much harder to use that in older Naruto's memories. Pervy Sage had said something about an imbalance in the spiritual and physical energies, but the only thing Naruto took away from that explanation was that he needed to train more before using it. Jiraiya said a lot that he didn't understand once Naruto told his story, something all the dates timelines or something. Naruto stopped paying attention to his words pretty quickly. But as he felt his body getting heavier and heavier, he let himself fall onto the soft grass he had been doing push-ups on. He turned around towards the sky, and took a deep breath. Hey! Every clone! Stop training! He yelled at the top of his lungs. Slowly but surely, all the Narutos in the field started disappearing into puffs of smoke. The memories rushed into his head. Man, even if older Naruto hadn't learned many jutsu, he sure was awesome. And since he combined with older Naruto, that meant he was awesome too. You youngsters sure are energetic. A raspy voice interrupted his musings. He turned around to see a middle-aged man walk up to him. You know, I used to be able to train like you when I was younger. Naruto looked at him curiously. But the moment he looked into his eyes, he fell asleep instantly. Wow, they really don't make shinobi like they used to, boss. A white-skinned head popped out of the ground. Stop talking and get ready, we don't have much time. The middle-aged man commented, the transformation jutsu around his body slipping off. Obito Uchiha quickly pulled up the boy's shirt and placed his hand on his stomach. His Rinnegan glowing as he focused on the tailed beast inside it, slowly pulling out some of its chakra. On his other arm, seals lit up, absorbing the chakra he had stolen. The moment a seal filled up, the white zetsu beside him would peel it off and replace it with a new one. After what felt like an eternity, Obito took his hand off Naruto's stomach. He was trembling, his regeneration not enough to counteract the Kyuubi's corrosive chakra. White zetsu gathered the stacks of seals full of chakra and handed them over to Obito, who quickly disappeared in a swirl of darkness. Obito had to be quick in transferring the chakra into the Gedmaz. Normal seals would never hold tailed beast chakra for long. Inside Naruto, a certain fox raged. He recognized that chakra in those eyes. Kurama didn't think his hatred for Mito Uzumaki could be surpassed, but this new enemy easily took the top spot. The same person responsible for controlling him 12 years ago, now with the same eyes as his father, stealing his power. But no matter how hard he slammed himself against his cage, he could not break free, trapped in his prison. He would calm down eventually, and he would start plotting. He despised humans, a bunch of disgusting animals spitting on his father's legacy. Kurama hated humans, every single one of them. But he would rather spend another 100 years in a damp sewer than let the bastard with the Rinnegan get away with anything. Even if it meant speaking with the blonde idiot who was currently his warden. 1 month later, 3 months into the time skip. Zabuza was standing in front of the prospective Templars. They were the first batch, which meant they were the very best. The first batch was always an example to the rest. And to date, the only to carry the title of Templar was Zabuza himself. Although Zabuza was convinced that he only got the title due to him being the head of the military wing, even if Hikari kept trying to convince him otherwise, he was not faithful enough to the Watcher to be called a Templar. But these men were, each one having gone through and passed rigorous mental and physical tests. They had the respect of their peers, and the drive to push themselves forward. These were the people who would lead the order to victory if war ever came knocking at the gates. "Listen up!" he shouted. "I don't want to hear any bullshit about being unfit for this position. You have been chosen for your skill and faith. The Watcher himself would not have called you here if you did not deserve to be." The 5 prospective Templars looked on in silence, their eyes focused on Zabuza's words. "You know what you signed up for, a life of fighting and training, with a lot of boring shit in between, but let this be known, if I see anything less than perfection from any of you, I will personally break every bone in your body. Is that understood?" Even with the full force of Zabuza's killing intent pressing down on them, they all barked out an affirmative response at once. Zabuza nodded in satisfaction. "Good, then go receive your blessings." They marched into the large stone building, each one ready to step forward for their god. Zabuza stayed outside. He knew the process of receiving a Templar blessing was a deeply personal thing. Every blessing, a distillation of what a person was and believed in. He would check them over to make sure they were all right afterwards, and then a day or two to let them adjust. But after that? Zabuza grinned, then he would establish the pecking order. It had been a while since he last cut loose. Chapter 48, A Templar's Test. Sadeko walked into the inner chamber. She disliked the uncertainty of what was going to happen. It meant she could not tailor her reactions properly. Her face was carefully molded into an expression of determination with a hint of anxiety. It was what fit the role she had crafted for herself, a devout believer and faithful servant to the Watcher. But as she walked beside her fellow candidates, her expectations were quickly broken. From one step to the next, her surroundings changed. Instead of a stone room, she found herself standing in a forest, the others gone. She quickly examined her situation and shifted her expression into one of shock. It was a useful tool to buy her time to refine her approach. "None of that now." A voice spoke from behind her. "It's not necessary." Sadeko spun around and found herself staring at a man with burned skin, wearing simple robes, both eyes ringed with gold. She, of course, recognized the appearance almost immediately. He had the same hair color, the same general appearance, even the burn scars matched what happened. This was Saint Ayamu. He was supposed to be dead, but she was also supposed to be in the Watcher's shrine, and she clearly wasn't. But this was good. The reaction here was an easy one to fake: religious fervor. She dropped to her knees and bowed low, but as her knees touched the ground, she found herself standing again, like she had never moved. "Come on now, I already said there's no need for that." Ayamu spoke with amusement in his voice. "I'm not here to talk to your mask, I'm here to talk to you." Sadeko carefully took stock of the situation. This was unfortunate. She was sure that her acting was enough to fool her fellows, and she had never seen any Crow clan members or Star Eaters show any sort of ability to see past her facade. But there was a chance that this was a test. So she kept her act up. Every time people had realized her true nature, it did not end well for her. Confusion and still a hint of reverence were painted on her face as she spoke. I am afraid I don't understand." The amusement fell from Ayamu's face, replaced with an unimpressed stare. "I think you do, Sadeko." He spoke seriously. "We have known from the moment you first joined us." For the first time in a long while, Sadeko felt uncertainty creeping into her mind. Normally it was simple. Once she figured out what normal people reacted like, all she had to do was make sure her face and voice matched the role she had chosen. But this not make sense. If they knew about her true self and her personal goals, then why had they allowed her to get this far? She let her feigned emotions fall away. leaving her face blank. Then why am I here? She questioned flatly. If her mask was useless, then she did not see the point of pretending. Ayamu raised an eyebrow. You're here because you are about to become a Templar, that's all. Sadeko thoughts were spinning in circles. This reaction did not fit any of her previous experiences. Usually being revealed meant rejection. She had learned as a child that honesty did not work. And yet... But I'm not faithful, I only wish for power. She said bluntly. The sooner she knew their stance towards her, the faster she could plan around it. Ayamu let out a short snort. I think you are misunderstanding what being faithful means, Sadeko. He started walking closer to her. Answer me this, do you believe the Watcher behind the stars exists? Yes. Of course she did, she had felt him when she had received her acolyte blessing. While his power and motives could not be known for certain, there certainly existed a being that called itself the Watcher. And do you follow his teachings? I mean in a sense that you do what the priests recommend and avoid what is warned against. Ayamu stopped right in front of her. Yes. Again, Sadeko answered quickly, most of the teachings were good advice, and even if she did not understand some of them, following them was still a good way to ward off suspicion and fit into her role better. Would you fight for the Order of the Watchers? Ayamu asked next. Yes. While she would not give her life in a doomed effort, fighting for the Order was a good way to grow stronger. After all, they supplied their members with training, knowledge, and powerful blessings. While fighting meant temporary danger and uncertainty, it provided far too many benefits to pass up on. It was also the best choice. By the time she was independent enough to leave her village and her mistakes there behind, she was too old to join any shinobi academy, and thus, it left her with few avenues to grow stronger and safer. And lastly, do you intend to betray the Order or the Watcher? Ayamu questioned seriously. No. Even if there was a better way to improve herself, Sadeko had invested too much into this path to abandon it. As far as she knew, there has been no true betrayal in the Order yet. If she betrayed it, then she would become the target of retribution from everyone. It was a foolish move, even if she was offered something much more valuable, replacing something sure with a possibility when she had already gained so much was nonsensical. Ayamu smiled at her. So, you believe in the Watcher, follow his teachings, would fight for the Order, and have no intentions to betray us? He questioned simply. Sadeko paused briefly before nodding slowly. That was technically accurate. It did not mention her motives for doing so. Then let me tell you a secret, Sadeko. Ayamu grinned, his eyes never leaving her own. That is better than most worshippers out there. Sadeko felt the same uncertainty once again take hold of her thoughts. That could not be true. Every fellow initiate and acolyte had a spark that she lacked, something she could never understand, only imitate. She was broken, missing something she could only guess it. This was a truth she had known since she could think. A selfish existence such as hers could not be equal to their devotion and belief. She did not understand what those words meant, not fully, they described a feeling she could not feel. An imperfect imitation could never compare to the real thing. And that was what her faith was, an imitation of what she thought real faith was, based on those around her. Ayamu reached out a hand and put it on her head, gently ruffling her hair. She let him, unsure what he wanted from her. I know you can't understand fully, how do you explain sound to a person that cannot hear, or sight to one who cannot see? He said softly. But take my words to heart, I'm here to tell you to not be afraid, you have been seen, you have been judged, and you have been accepted, not your mask, but you. Sadeko was incapable of feeling emotions like love or happiness, she only knew their outward signs through years of observation. But a long-present feeling of discomfort eased slightly. Years of paranoia that she would once again be outed and cast out had taken their toll on her. The reduction of this burden was pleasant. Now go on. He took his hand off her head, and pointed upwards. You have a meeting with the big man upstairs. Sadeko looked up at the sky. Ah! The sky above her was filled with stars, the surrounding trees disappeared, Ayamu faded away into nothingness. The ground fell out from under her feet, and she felt herself rising into the air. Among the stars, something moved, an incomprehensible being shifting behind the curtain of darkness. Eyes opened, each one burning with golden light, focused solely on Sadeko. It stared at her, inside her, past her skin and flesh, to her very soul. Then it spoke. It was not sound, but a sensation, every fiber of her body resonated with the voice of the being in the sky. The words were not comprehensible, but Sadako understood them all the same. You have been chosen. Carry my will. Wield my strength. Sadako thought she understood faith a little better now. Chapter 49, Time Skip End. 4 months later, 7 months into the time skip. Sarah was standing in front of her newly built palace. Ren was almost rebuilt, or at least, all the rubble was gone. The initiates and acolytes were a watcher-sent blessing, their ninjutsu had sped up the demolition and excavation of Ren immensely. Now there were enough residential buildings for everyone in the caravan, the farms were producing foodstuff, and the reconstruction of the towers was about to start. She had mixed feelings about the towers. They were constructed by her mother on the advice of Mukid, made for the sole purpose of spreading his puppets and control. But Yatagarasu made the good point that just because the Rimayaku and the towers had been used for evil, it didn't mean they always had to be used for such purposes. Once the towers were finished and the Rimayaku was unsealed, no one will be able to use Ren as a battlefield again, even if using it made Sarah feel dirty, her people always came first, now and forever. Your Highness. A young initiate approached her. The people are assembled, they are ready for your words. Sarah nodded with a grateful smile towards him. She walked up the wooden platform assembled for this very occasion. The entire population of Ren stood in front of her, looking at her expectantly. My people. Her voice rang through the air. After months of work, I can say with pride that our home has been reborn. She had more to say, but the people in front of her drowned out any other words she might have said with their cheers. She smiled. Amikiri was standing on Shin's shoulder, in her crow form, of course. They were in the middle of a meeting with the daimyo. The nicest thing Amikiri could say about him was that he did not make the land of demons worse. Which, from the memories of her creator, was actually quite an accomplishment. To leave the country in the hands of the people and be content with a lavish lifestyle was apparently uncommon among rulers. Of course, he had to break the streak of not caring about things by suddenly getting paranoid at the rise of the order in this land. Are you sure that this order is not a threat? He questioned nervously. What about those acolytes? They are clearly shinobi in disguise. Shin let out a quiet sigh. Amikiri was more resistant to his insane prattling. This was the third time he had asked the same question with different wording. As I said before, Lord Tashio. Shin started calmly. While there is no doubt the acolytes are powerful, they are clearly devoted to peace, so as long as we do not threaten them, they will not harm us. Are you sure? Tashio insisted again. They must be planning something. Shin resisted the urge to strangle the daimyo. Yes, I'm sure. She responded as politely as she could manage. But, tell me, Lord Tashio, why exactly do you mistrust the order this much? They have not harmed a single person in the land of demons. Tashio hesitated for a second before answering. Well. Lord Katsu approached me recently with his concerns about their growth. Amikiri misliked this whole situation. Wave was much better run than this. Was all of this really started because another noble disliked that the common folk were flocking to a religion? Lord Tashio, Shin interrupted Amikiri's thoughts. The last time you listened to Lord Katsu, it ended up with your marriage being nearly destroyed. The daimyo winced at that statement, and wisely didn't bring it up again. You might be looking at the wrong way. If the order becomes more prevalent, we could get the land of water's famous Tekadon easier. I heard that you have had some trouble. Amikiri let the conversation fade into the background again. She was only here due to the invitation Shin received mentioning the order, but it seems Shin had this well in hand. Why the child in the room was the most mature human here she did not know. If she was very optimistic, she could even say this was a good sign. If the land of demons branch of the order was big enough to make some nobles nervous, then they were clearly doing something right. 5 months later, 1 year into the time skip. Suzuki was walking along dark corridors of Otagakuer. He had been summoned by Orochimaru himself. He ignored the faint stench of blood in the air. It was common in Otagakuer, it did not matter. He arrived at his destination, knocking twice before being told to enter. Orochimaru looked up from the scrolls scattered across his desk. Snakes holding some of them up for him, his arms still blackened and useless. Suzuki, welcome. He spoke with a pleased smile. You have grown quite strong. What did you call me here for? He questioned bluntly. He disliked interacting with Orochimaru if he could avoid it. How impatient. The man tugged. I remember you went to Wave, yes. Yes. Suzuki responded curtly. If Orochimaru wanted something, he should just get to the point. He was not in the mood for Orochimaru's games. Did you meet any of the Order's members while there? The question was innocent sounding, but Sasuke knew better. He also knew better than to lie or dodge the question. He had learned the hard way how poor of an idea that was. No, I did not. Besides the client's family and one encounter in the forest, I did not interact with anyone. Orochimaru let out a soft hum. Ah, yes, I remember the reports. The old fool was quite shaken by the fact that little Naruto was told about his legacy. He almost called for an ANBU squad to look for that man. He muttered softly. Sasuke ignored the revelation that apparently Naruto was related to the people the burned man mentioned. It did not matter. No matter, Kabuto has delivered some interesting reports to me, about the Land of Waves. Some of the members of the new religion in that land have some interesting abilities. Orochimaru commented idly. Abilities that don't use chakra. Sasuke had an inkling of what Orochimaru was planning. And since my last outpost in Wave has been out of contact for more than a year, you will be leading an expedition to Wave. Capture any order members you can find. I want to research their abilities. And there it was. Although this was the first time he was being sent out this far away, normally any tasks Orochimaru sent him on did not leave the land of sound. But Sasuke would never make it easy for Orochimaru. Why should I? He questioned coldly. Orochimaru simply chuckled. With a short burst of hisses, a snake slithered from under his shirt. It opened his mouth and a scroll was partially pushed out. You were working on modifying your Chidori, were you not? Orochimaru's smile was poisonous. Sasuke scowled. Of course, Orochimaru knew he was stuck. That scroll likely contained information on lightning shape manipulation. He'd been suspicious that his learning materials did not include information on that. Orochimaru had deliberately kept it from him. I knew that would get your attention. The Sunin continued to smile. In 2 days, you will lead 2 teams into Wave, capture as many order members as possible. The scroll disappeared back into the snake, and then it slithered back under Orochimaru's shirt. Sasuke turned around and walked away. He ignored Orochimaru's laughter as he walked away. It did not matter. Once he was strong enough to kill Itachi, he was going to burn this place down. Chapter 50, Consequences. 1 week later. Sasuke was waiting. They had been doing a lot of that the past couple of days. One of the teams had pretended to be bandits stealing from a caravan passing through. Now they were waiting for the order to send someone after them. But finally, he saw something in the distance. It was a single woman. They were casually walking towards them, wearing a featureless white mask and donning a large cloak made of black feathers. As the masked woman closed the distance, Sasuke activated his Sharingan and signaled his temporary subordinates to get ready to attack, drawing his sword. Her chakra looked strong to Sasuke, but nothing amazing, about as much as Sasuke himself. But Sasuke kept his senses sharp. Orochimaru thought they did not have any Genin-level threats besides Zabuza Momokai, but something about this whole situation made his instincts scream that there was danger. Even if he had 4 Genin under his command, and she was outnumbered 11 to 1, some part of him was still tense. As the masked woman closed the distance, Sasuke signaled for half of them to attack. They rushed forward in a shunshin, visible only to due to his Sharingan. 2 of them rushed at her, weapons in hand, while 2 others started casting a genjutsu to scramble her senses. The 5th would be waiting in the back, ready to bury her in an earth jutsu once the other 4 distracted her. It was the plan they developed for if they sent a single target. It went wrong immediately. The moment they left cover, the masked figure raised their hand into the air and pointed upwards. Up! She spoke simply, and the 4 shinobi got yanked upwards into the sky. Then she lowered her hand and pointed towards the ground. Down! All of them plummeted to the ground at speeds far beyond what a normal fall could produce. Only one managed to right himself, before they all hit the ground with a deafening boom. 4 craters were formed, his Sharingan captured every detail. The 3 that didn't manage to orient themselves were flattened on impact, blood flowing from under them. The last survivor's legs had shattered, and he was attempting to drag himself out of the crater with his arms. But the woman ignored the survivor, instead looking at his group. As a Templar of the Order, I must give you this warning: cease all hostilities immediately and submit to interrogation or be executed as enemies. She stated flatly. Any attempts of retreat will also be interpreted as hostility. Her voice was devoid of emotion, not a hint of anything beyond neutrality. Sasuke wasn't dumb. This person was clearly using some form of gravity manipulation, but the problem was that he could not see any chakra involved in her ability. This was bad. He thought that if he used his cursed seal, he would be able to survive her ability without injury, but that was assuming she had used the full strength of it. The woman did not seem to mind waiting, standing there patiently while they discussed their strategy using sign language. He was down fortunen, and it hadn't even been a minute. He signaled the remaining people in the team to attack from range. 2 of the Jainin started weaving hand signs. Earth style, earth flow river. The ground under the masked figure melted into mud and tried to bury her. But she simply floated into the air a few feet, leaving her unaffected by the technique. Sasuke activated his cursed seal, straight to the second stage. A pair of hand-shaped wings burst out from his back. As he felt the power rushing into him, Sasuke felt unbeatable. Why was he even worried? This woman had no idea how strong he was. A single slash would end her, no need for anything fancy. Even if she tried to crush him, he could easily overpower her technique. He burst forward, his sword coated in electricity, fast enough that he was almost invisible to almost everyone in the clearing. Everyone except the woman. A slash to her neck was stopped with a single finger. Sasuke's eyes widened, his Sharingan could see a faint distortion between his blade and her finger. She tilted her head at him. Why would you get close? She questioned with a hint of curiosity. That seems unwise. Sasuke tried to move back, kicking off the muddy ground with a burst of chakra, but there was a weight around him, the air felt thick. Instead of him shooting backwards as he planned, it was more of a gentle drift. The woman casually poked him in the chest. Back! She intoned flatly. Sasuke's chest was crushed inward, his vision went dark, his consciousness faded away. With a coughing gasp, he woke back up. He was lying face down on the ground, blood trickling from his mouth, his chest hurt and his ribs were almost certainly crushed. His hand was still tightly gripping his sword, but when he tried to lift himself off the ground, his vision swam and he felt lightheaded. He tried looking around. He was surrounded by destruction, large craters littered the battlefield, and the Odo shinobi were scattered across it, unmoving. The woman was kneeling on the ground, checking the pulse of one of the others, a man that had almost half of his body buried in the dirt. One of her arms was bleeding, and her clothing and cloak were singed. Sasuke tried getting up again, but even lifting his head made him feel like he was about to pass out. Also dead. Hikari-sama will be upset. The woman muttered softly. A pity. She stood up and looked at Sasuke, before simply turning and walking away. He watched her leave, confused on why she wasn't finishing him off. She clearly noticed he was alive. He struggled to stabilize his breathing as he watched her walk into the distance. Eventually, his cursed seal healed the worst of the damage, the transformation fell away and he slowly got to his feet. He staggered around and checked on every other member of their group. Just as the woman had said, all of them were dead. He was an idiot. He knew the transformation influenced his emotions, but still, he let it influence his thinking. Rushing ahead and trying to overwhelm her in close range when he had no idea about her abilities' limits, just because he had a brief feeling of invincibility, was a stupid move. It was even stupider because she was wounded when he woke back up. If he hadn't been taken out of the fight early, they might have won. Sasuke collapsed against a nearby tree. Even if his cursed seal healed the worst of it, his chest was still a giant bruise, and he was pretty sure his ribs were still broken. Hey Sasuke! A voice coming from his right interrupted his thoughts. He tensed, reaching for a kunai and activating his Sharingan again. Standing near him was a familiar man, burns covering most of his body. It was the man he had met almost 2 years ago. Ayamu. You. Why are you here? He questioned warily. It could not be a coincidence that the man appeared after Sasuke had been defeated by an order member. Ah, I don't think you have any right to question me about things like that, do you? Considering the situation. Ayamu's tone was relaxed, yet his golden-ringed eyes bored into Sasuke's, unblinkingly. Chapter 51, Sasuke Gets the Truth PT1. I was annoyed, not angry. At the end of the day, Sadako got to test out her new blessing. Orochimaru lost a couple of squads worth of shinobi, and no one from Wave got hurt. It was a good outcome. And I was satisfied with the blessing I had given her. It was basically gravity manipulation. Strong enough to make her do what I want Templars to do. They are supposed to be my answer to Jainin, which was working. She had fought 4 of them at once and won without suffering any serious injuries. But Sasuke helping Orochimaru fuel his torture machine and the implication that the snake fondler had set his sights on Wave left me in a bad mood. The only reason I intervened and told Sadako to not kill him was because I felt pity for the kid. And he was a kid, he was what? 14? 15? At that age, I was wasting my life away playing League of Legends. I could hardly blame him for making poor decisions. Especially considering the whole fact that he was traumatized to hell and back because his older brother killed his whole family and clan, and then made Sasuke watch the whole thing on repeat for 3 days. But that was little consolation when it was clear Orochimaru wanted to examine some of my blessings. Whatever person he would have kidnapped would not live long. Just because Sasuke did not pull the lever, doesn't mean he is innocent when he is the one tying the noose around someone's neck. I was going to give one freebie, just because no one got hurt, except the Oto Shinobi, of course. He looked like he was having trouble understanding the situation, so I guess I should start talking. I was going to say that I don't understand you, but I think I do. I sat down in front of him, ignoring his hand tightening around the kunai. He glared at me even harder. You know, Sharingan are pretty intimidating in person. But he didn't say anything. I sighed. I waved my hand, purely for show, as Sasuke's wounds visibly healed. Thank me I didn't have to worry about DP for small shit like this. The days of having to worry about a measly 82 DP were long gone. Anything below 4 digits was pocket change. I remember being excited that I got 42 DP after a full sermon. Oh, how times changed. I ignored his baffled expression. He would get used to my bullshit eventually. The worst part is the dreams, in my opinion. I started softly. Not the nightmares, you get used to those. I'm talking about the good ones, dreams where you are happy, where everything is fine. Sasuke's tight grip around his kunai relaxed slightly, but his frown deepened. And then you wake up, and for a split second, it still seems real, everything is right with the world. I let out a bitter chuckle. Then understanding sets in, and you realize none of it was real. Your heart feels like it's being squeezed, your breath gets stuck in your throat, and for that moment, you just want to close your eyes again and go back to a better world. He looked away from me, and there was an almost unnoticeable hitch in his breathing. You get used to the nightmares, you get used to waking up covered in cold sweat and drenched in fear, but no matter how much time passes, you can never quite get used to that hint of hope being snatched away by cold reality. In some ways was glad I didn't need to sleep anymore. We sat there in silence for a while. What do you want? Sasuke finally spoke, his voice less tense, but still cold. Why heal me? Who even are you? In reverse order, I'm Ayamu. I healed you so we could talk without you having your ribs poking your lungs whenever you take a breath, and I wanted to talk. My responses were straightforward and honest, and almost fully useless. Sasuke let out an annoyed huff of air. You know what I mean, either actually tell me or go away. Wow, rude. If you want better answers, ask better questions. I replied with amusement. He was clearly annoyed at that. Why did that woman spare me? He demanded. Because I asked her to, I didn't want her to kill you. I answered truthfully. Why? He questioned suspiciously. I have a soft spot for you, I feel like you got dealt a very bad hand. He scoffed at that. Did he not believe me? That hurts me right in my non-existent heart. I was a very honest person. Why did she listen to you? I was honestly confused by that question. Konoha and by extension Orochimaru had to have noticed the connection between the burned man who talked to Naruto and Sasuke that was called Ayamu and the now fairly famous martyr Saint Ayamu, who was burned alive. I didn't even change my hair color or general appearance besides the golden eyes and the burns. Did you miss the part where I'm considered a pretty big deal in the land of waves? I questioned slowly. I mean, everyone around here has heard my story. Sasuke stared at me blankly. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. So you are actually the same Ayamu? Orochimaru thought you were a copycat since Kakashi verified that the real one died, and you never showed back up in the public eye. He paused for a second. Did you fake your death? Oh yeah, I remember Kakashi rummaging through my grave. I hope his pillows were warm and slightly moist in the summer. No, I actually am dead. Sasuke stared at me, waiting for me to continue. I didn't. I had to use exactly 0.6 dp to moisten my eyes, but he eventually lost the staring contest. Fine, whatever, what did you want to talk about? He eventually said. I dislike choices made with incomplete information, especially if it leads to regret. I let my demeanor shift into something much more serious. I wanted Sasuke to understand I was not joking around anymore. Do you want to learn the full truth of the Uchiha massacre? I really hated the old trope of people learning the truth only after someone dies. If Sasuke wants to forgive Itachi? Fine. If Sasuke wants to kill him? Fine. I had no stake in that race. But he was going to do it with full knowledge of what happened that night, from the Uchiha's marginalization due to Madara's crazy arc all the way to Denzo being a power-hungry madman. Sasuke stiffened. What truth? He questioned slowly, his voice strained. I think a part of him did not want to hear anything, too scared to learn something that might shake the hatred that kept him going for so long. But he didn't tell me to fuck off, which meant he would listen. So, I started speaking. Chapter 52, Sasuke Gets the Truth PT2. It took a few hours to explain. It wasn't a short story, and by the end, the sun was setting. Sasuke was, let's say taking it well, and by well, I mean he hasn't flown into a rage yet. Which is already better than what I expected, but I think I would prefer that to this unsettling silence. After I revealed that Itachi killed the Uchiha clan because they were planning a rebellion, he had gotten a bit despondent, and now that I finished giving him all the information I remembered, he had basically shut down. But I was content to sit there and wait. I was a very patient person these days. An hour passed in complete silence, night fully settled around us, the only light coming from the moon and stars. Why? Sasuke spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. What a question though, why? It always boiled down to the same thing, in one way or another. Because people are flawed. I said simply. Fear, pride, envy, selfishness, selflessness, love, all of it led to a boy killing his family under orders. He stared at me in silence for a few moments before responding. That's not a satisfying answer. He responded flatly. I chuckled at that. He was right, but that didn't mean my answer wasn't true. There are no good answers when it comes to this sort of thing, Sasuke. It was a tragedy that only happened because every little detail lined up perfectly to lead to one horrible conclusion. I shrugged at him. Could it have been avoided? Definitely, but we have the benefit of hindsight and are looking at this event as a bad thing, for Danzo? Obito? Itachi himself? This was the desired solution at the time, even if all of them had different goals and reasonings. Sasuke looked away from me. What do you think? He asked, still quiet. Do you agree with what Itachi did? I hummed in thought, that was an easy one to answer. Fuck no. Sasuke twitched slightly at my vehement tone. I understand the rationale behind it, but was it too much to ask to not kill the children? Actually, how many Uchiha babies did you know about? He shuffled awkwardly before responding. A little bit of hatred reappeared on his face. I know at least 2 of my cousins were newborns. And that was all I needed to hear, but I feel like this is heading into a philosophical debate about the morality of killing potential enemies. But I wasn't here to tell Sasuke how to live his life, so before he got too attached to my opinion, I should end this. Sasuke, I think you should take a break. He looked up at me, I continued. Relax for a few months, the capital has a big shrine to my god, they give out food and shelter to anyone that asks, and if you help them, then they even pay you a little bit. Just plan and think for a bit, don't make a choice now that could end up hurting you later. I got up from the ground, stretching a little. It was fully dark now. I think I had done what I wanted, but before I left, there was one last thing. Also, as a warning, do not go back to Orochimaru, and if you want, come to any shrine if you want that cursed mark removed. It contains a soul fragment from the snake, it will slowly corrupt you. The last thing I needed was for Orochimaru to get his wish and start running around in Sasuke's body. I vanished into thin air. There is one thing I should do before the night ends. Haruka was dreaming. It was a good dream, but the specifics were unimportant. Because she suddenly found herself standing in a forest, a starry sky stretched across the horizon as far as the eye could see. The typical detachment from dreaming faded away, leaving her fully aware. But it became clear what was happening when she spotted a familiar god high up above, looking at something far in the distance. She was in the divine realm, but why? Hey! Someone called out to her. She spun around and found Ayamu standing behind her, looking just as he did on the day of his death. The golden-ringed eyes being the only difference. Ayamu. She stuttered out, the man simply smiled. Yeah, sorry for taking so long, Haruka. He apologized softly. One day later. I was sitting on top of my newly made tower, to relax a little bit. I had been renovating my divine realm a little bit, and Yatagarasu wanted to make something big, so we made a huge tower together. It would have been impossible to build in the mortal realm, but I could cheat with divine power to make it not collapse in on itself. Yatagarasu was the one who helped me design it. He was excited to build something with me, and honestly, I could never say no to my kids. We ended up making it a family thing, all 6 Star Eaters being teleported, when they had some spare time, to my divine realm to work on it. The tower was a marvel, each floor unique and filled with wonders. The first few levels housed gardens, filled with whatever crazy stuff me or the Star Eaters had come up with. The only rule I had was nothing sentient, so we had some weird shit in those floors. Higher up, we had created a grand library. Any book that existed within range of my influence was copied and stored there, including all the jutsu. Another floor was dedicated to the arts, with dioramas made by me. All the scenes I saw that, I felt, should be preserved were put in there. It was a fun project. It maybe wasn't the best use of my DP, but everyone was having fun with it, so I couldn't resist. I was contemplating a decision I was about to make, one that I knew would lead to some of my followers dying. The decision was whether or not I should raise Otogakure to the ground. Orochimaru would never leave my people alone, and he had cultivated a blight called Otogakure filled with power-hungry maniacs that would be very interested in my blessings. When Yatagarasu crushed the small outpost he had in Wave way back when, I was relieved about the fact that he did not react to it, but back then it was unlikely since he was in the process of setting up his invasion of Konoha. But now? He started probing. Killing a few of his squads would only pique his interest. The best solution was to strike first. Letting someone like Orochimaru have time to plan was foolish, so that meant attacking as soon as possible. But that would result in death, of my people specifically. It was almost unavoidable, but that was war. Ah, fuck it, I would do my best to minimize casualties. I had already accepted that I was not omnipotent, and letting a wound fester was not my style. Amikiri. I reached out to her with my mind. Yes, Creator. She responded immediately. Keep the land of demons safe, the Order and Wave will be going to war. I felt the burst of concern from her, followed by a sense of understanding and acceptance. I will do as you command. She vowed solemnly. Ah, how cute. It's just a precaution, the land of demons is far away and the Order's presence there is not well known. Just make sure that none of the initiates or acolytes try anything stupid like trying to rouse the people to join in. I wasn't blind to the fact that a lot of my followers could be fanatical, the danger of religions and all that. Yes, I understand. Satisfied with her response, I moved on. No. Your wish is coming true, keep Rin safe, and coordinate with Yatagarasu and Shun if anything happens. She was incredibly pleased to hear that. Finally. She responded excitedly. Please make sure Orochimaru dies painfully. Ah, how cute. Nu was another one of my Star Eaters, the one assigned to Rin now that the reconstruction was done. She was the one that advocated for interference the most. If I could be said to not care about proper flow of things, then she was the embodiment of fuck it, we ball. She also did not like Orochimaru. Thought he was an edgy loser that should be fed to a stray dog. A fair opinion, but harsh on the dog. Orochimaru was probably not food grade. With that, both of them should secure my religion's secondary branches. Now to wait until the Order of the Watcher holds its next meeting, the Great Messenger would be making an announcement. Chapter 53, War Declarations. Later that night. Kazuo was feeling annoyed. Maybe he shouldn't expect anything different considering his past, but Kirigakure not sending any more ships after their hunting squad got captured gave him false hope. Fucking shinobi. Kazuo. He snapped out of his thoughts, and realized everyone was looking at him with expectation, waiting for something. Sorry. He apologized. What were we talking about? Zabuza snorted, before repeating what he said. Any of the bodies tell you something good? Kazuo shook his head. Besides some interesting implications about Otokagure's enjoyment of experimentation, no. He learned a lot from examining those 2 squads, but very little of it would be useful, just disturbing. What does that mean? Zabuza questioned gruffly. Age correlated directly to how altered their bodies were, the older ones had more enhancements to them. Kazuo explained briefly. The enhancements were haphazardly applied, different in each person, and mostly minor things. One of them had gills for some reason. Zabuza hummed in response. Anything that we could use. Kazuo's face shifted into an expression of disgust. Maybe as a guide of what not to do, even before I was blessed by the Watcher I would consider this work sloppy. If you want gills that badly, give me a few months and I can give you some. It was quiet for a moment. I will keep it in mind. Zabuza said dryly. Haruka's lips were twitching, trying to hide a smile. But the relaxed atmosphere was interrupted by a crow suddenly appearing in the middle of the table everyone was sitting around. Heads turned, and everyone got serious. The great messenger had appeared. You all look well. The great messenger greeted them. I bear a message from the Watcher himself. Haruka bowed her head, Kazuo straightened his posture, while Zabuza simply leaned forward. Hikari still had the casual look on her face. The Watcher declared Otogakure to be his enemies. He continued calmly. And he wishes to see it destroyed. Kazuo sucked in a sharp breath. This was the first time since GAT that the Watcher took such an aggressive stance on something. Orochimaru and his followers are a rot, one that cannot be allowed to grow further. This is big, Kazuo realized. This was a declaration of war. Some part of him rebelled at the thought of war. He still remembered the horrors he witnessed. If he asked he could resign, no one would hold it against him, he could choose to not participate. But another, louder part of him rose above that feeling. This time it was different. The Watcher fought with them, he has never failed to protect them. He looked around at his fellow order members. Haruka's expression was grim, but determined. Zabuza was stone-faced, but he had a glint in his eye, eager for battle. Hikari was nonchalant, Kazuo was sure that she had already predicted something like this. Kazuo let out a sigh. Well, someone had to stitch the wounds, so it might as well be him. Guess they are at war now. 2 days later. Tsunade was sitting in her office. Contrary to normal, it was a fairly neat and organized space. For the past few weeks, there had been no big messes, everyone in the village behaved. She still had a few hours worth of mind-numbing documents to sort through daily, but she actually had time to relax. So when there was a knock on her door, Tsunade let out an exasperated sigh. Come in. The door opened, revealing the familiar form of her receptionist. My lady, the representative from the order has requested a meeting with you. She reported politely. That explained why she was being interrupted from her paperwork time. They were on the express meeting list, mostly due to the fact that they were still a mystery to Konoha. Her eyes narrowed. This would be the first time they've ever asked for a meeting, besides the first few a year ago when they first established their presence in the village. Send them in. The receptionist nodded and disappeared behind the door. A moment later, a figure entered the office, dressed in the distinctive black and white robes of the order. The hood was up, obscuring the representative's face. Yamada was his name if she remembered right. Lady Hokage, Yamada said, bowing respectfully. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice. Tsunade leaned back in her chair, studying the representative closely. Of course. What can I do for you? The man straightened. I come bearing news from our headquarters in the Land of Waves. Our leaders have decided to declare war on Otokagure and thus, by extension, on the Land of Sound. Tsunade's eyebrows shot up. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her desk. The Land of Waves is declaring war on Otokagure? Are you aware that Orochimaru leads that village? We are well aware, Lady Hokage. Then you must also know that the Land of Waves lacks the military strength to challenge a hidden village. You don't even have a formal shinobi force. The representative remained calm. The order has its own resources. Tsunade was starting to get irritated as she worked through the full implications of this. Resources. Tsunade's fingers drummed against her desk. What kind of resources could match up against one of the most dangerous shinobi alive? I'm afraid I cannot disclose the details of our capabilities. But rest assured, we have planned this carefully. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. This seems like suicide. The Land of Waves is small. Your economy is booming, I admit, but there is a limit to strength bought by money. Starting a war now. She was annoyed at this. They have had a relative peace for so long. 2 small nations unrelated to the rest of the Great 5 shinobi villages might not be on the level of the previous wars, but she knew very well on how fast this could escalate. The last 2 wars had started with minor nations fighting and the great villages interfering. Tsunade sank back into her chair, massaging her temples. You realize I can't officially support this. The political fallout would be catastrophic. We are not asking for support, Lady Hokage. The order stands on its own. And what makes you so confident? What gives you the audacity to challenge someone like Orochimaru? The representative's posture straightened, and though Tsunade couldn't see their face, she sensed a shift in their demeanor. The Watcher guides us. Through his divine wisdom, we have seen the path to victory. It will be swift, decisive, and it will free countless souls from Orochimaru's grasp. Ah! For a moment, she forgot they were religious fanatics. Tsunade scoffed. Divine wisdom? Your betting people's lives on religious faith. Faith moves mountains, Lady Hokage. We do not enter this conflict blindly. She studied the figure before her, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, she crossed her arms. I can't stop you. But know this, if this escalates beyond your control, if it threatens the stability of the region, Konoha will have to intervene. We understand completely. The representative bowed again. Thank you for your time, Lady Hokage. The figure turned and walked to the door, their robes rustling softly against the floor. Before leaving, they paused. The Watcher's blessing be upon you, Lady Hokage. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Tsunade alone with her thoughts. Fucking wave. Chapter 54, The Start of the War. Zabuza was overlooking the flat grass landscape in front of him. It was covered almost entirely by tents. Hundreds of masked people were running around, preparing for war, positioning themselves and organizing squads. Around the camps, thousands of priests and volunteers were building pyres and waiting. The Order of the Watcher was mobilizing. It was a weird feeling. He remembered seeing a ragtag group storming Gat's compound, killing their way through. And now here they were, an entire army mobilizing, ready to crush a hidden village. A small one, but still. What progress, and he was at the center of it all. As he was contemplating the situation, Haruka stepped up behind him. Hello Zabuza, how are you doing? She greeted softly, a warm smile on her face, but he could see she was worried. Zabuza let out a grunt. I'm fine. He reassured. You shouldn't be so nervous, this is what the military wing exists for, we won't fail. She looked away from him, her gaze scanning over the battlefield to be. But people will die. She said quietly. But people will die. He agreed. That's what war is, it can't be helped. Haruka's expression soured, but if she was looking for pretty words she could look elsewhere. Zabuza did not sugarcoat things. She was the one who was the most troubled about war. Kazuo was an old dog, one who already had his fair share of battles, and Hikari had a cold practicality that meant she did not shy away from necessary violence. Even Kenji, the goofy man that he was, would gladly cut down the Watcher's enemies, a true fanatic in his own right. Zabuza himself was a killer, deep down to his core. He lived and breathed violence in a way the others never would, but Haruka was different. She understood it, but she didn't like it. She was not a fighter by nature. How are things going? She asked after a few moments of silence. We are just waiting for the crows to come back. Once the enemy positions are confirmed, we will start. He answered gruffly. Don't worry too much, with the Watcher high above us, victory is certain. Haruka smiled at his reassurance, and they sat together quietly for a while. Did you know Hikari filled Haku as Haku Mamakai in the registry? She suddenly asked. What? Zabuza responded, genuinely bewildered. She said you were refusing to fill out the forms, so she did it instead. Haruka continued calmly, but he could hear the amusement in her voice. Zabuza grumbled under his breath. Don't be too angry, she said that Haku smiled when she told him about it. Haruka teased gently. He snorted. Whatever, if Haku liked it, then he could be a Mamakai, who cares? Whatever, it doesn't matter anyway. Haruka didn't make a sound, but he felt like she was laughing at him anyway. A few hours later. A crow cawed loudly as it flew down from the sky, landing on top of a nearby rock. It is I, Yami, I bring the ruinous tidings that the time is nigh. The crow said loudly. My brethren fly from far and wide to deliver our enemy's doom. Zabuza stared blankly. It was best to let him get it out of his system. Getting any of the three brothers to stop being dramatic was an exercise in futility. Getting them to shut up would only make them twice as annoying later. Cold, bitter hatred shall descend upon them like a hungry wolf. And then, only then will their sins be cleansed in the blood they shed. His voice echoed ominously across the open plains. They could never hide their misbegotten souls from our gaze. For our eyes were forged by despair, tempered by pain and sharpened with purpose. Their feudal FO. Zabuza grabbed the crow's beak, shutting him up. The positions are confirmed. He asked. Yami glared at him in annoyance, but once Zabuza started squeezing tighter, Yami relented and nodded his head quickly. He released the bird. Good. Zabuza turned and walked over to a tent, grabbing a horn resting on a table and raising it to his lips. The sound of the horn echoed throughout the plains, causing people to scramble and get ready. A few minutes later, another horn sounded, then another, and another. Zabuza counted each one. And that's 7. He raised the horn to his lips again and blew. This time, twice in quick succession. As the signal was given to move out, 1,000 priests and worshippers, men and women alike, began to pray together. Pyres were lit, offerings burned, and incantations recited. The military wing members watched on with silent determination as their brethren performed these sacred rites. The sky grew unnaturally dark, and soon enough, the only light visible was the glow of the pyres. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and louder until it was almost deafening. As they watched, countless stars started igniting, filling the void-like sky. Something massive moved, hidden behind the stars. A pair of arms reached out from the depths of the starry night, grabbing reality itself and slowly pulling the sky sideways, the very stars themselves moving with the motion. But the sky did not fade into the horizon, instead it poured onto the ground. Within a second, the once empty grass plains were covered in shimmering darkness. Hundreds of feet started sinking into it, disappearing beneath the surface, until finally, the last person was gone. Only then did everything snap back to its original state, leaving the priests and worshippers standing alone, under a shining sun. The prayers did not stop for hours. In the land of sound, the sky was overcast, grey clouds hung overhead. Sando was scratching at his skin, slightly blue blood leaking out from his scabs, his mood sour. He hated guard duty, and the constant itchiness wasn't helping, but this was supposed to be temporary, both the guard duty and the itch. Just a few more weeks, and then his treatment would be complete, he would be stronger, faster, better in every way. A sudden hunger for meat filled him, but Sando ignored it as best as he could. Guess he was hungrier than he thought, but lunchtime was still a few hours away. As he looked around the camp with bored eyes, something caught his attention, in the distance. He squinted, trying to make out what was happening. Was the ground darker? His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It was like the ground was being eaten by darkness, spreading at an unnaturally rapid pace. And then he saw them people emerging from the darkness, each one wearing a featureless white mask. Around them, tents and temporary fortifications began to rise. Within half a minute, he was no longer looking at open ground, instead there stood a fully fledged war camp right in front of the entrance of Otagakur. What the fuck? He mumbled, baffled. But he snapped out of it when he remembered his job. Sound the alarm. He screamed as loudly as he could, turning towards the gate. Sound the alarm. We are under attack. Someone must have heard him, because the alarm bells started ringing. Shinobi streamed out of the entrances like a swarm of bees from their hive. The sound of commands being called out and hundreds of feet hitting the ground filled his ears. He turned around to look at the battlefield, only to see a giant monstrosity staring back at him. It was massive, easily 3 meters tall, covered in feathers and 3 shining golden eyes crowning its head. Its beak opened, white flames flickering from its throat, before it spat out a white beam. It hit a squad that was rushing out of the gates. The explosion engulfed half of them in white flame. Only the Jainin managed to react quickly enough to avoid the blast. The war had started. Chapter 55, Orochimaru gets annoyed. Orochimaru sat deep within Otagakur, feeling a spike of annoyance when the alarms went off. A very specific one, only meant to be used in case of an invasion. Why now? He was already irritated that Sasuke had not reported on time. He wasn't too worried. From his intelligence reports, while the Order of the Watcher was training an army, they had only started doing so less than 2 years ago. If it wasn't for the fact that one of his spies with sensor-type abilities informed him that they had abilities that did not use chakra, he would have dismissed Wave and the Order as irrelevant. And now someone had the gall to attack his base? It seemed like someone was eager to die. And Orochimaru was more than happy to oblige. Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto entered his lab. We are under attack by unknown forces. He was already aware, but he refrained from saying anything, instead waiting for Kabuto to continue. It's a large force, over 100 enemy combatants with unknown abilities, none of them below Chunin level in strength, along with some giant monsters, according to our shinobi. He continued professionally. Shall we evacuate? No, the rejection has not progressed so much that I would run at the first sign of trouble. Orochimaru responded, his voice tinged with a hint of frustration, if only he was in his prime, but this body was starting to reject him, and any hand seals being unusable made it even worse. Follow. He got up from his chair and walked out of the room, Kabuto closed behind him. As they moved through the compound, shinobi ran past and by them. Orochimaru was satisfied, they were not the perfected war machine he remembered from his own days as a loyal shinobi of Konoha, but for the amount of effort he put into them, they were passable. Once outside, he saw the battle taking place before him. He let out a displeased hum. This was worse than expected, he quickly analyzed the battlefield. The enemy combatants were outnumbered, but were higher quality, the weakest of them, the ones only wearing the masks, were as strong as Chunin. The ones wearing that interesting cross between a robe and light armor seemed to be stronger. In speed, they were below his average Jainin, but they were more than making up for it with their unusual jutsu, while he saw some use hand signs, most just, did whatever they wanted without any obvious limiters. That piqued his interest. Was this the order of the Watcher? It did sound similar to the reports he had gotten. He felt a spike of worry, did Sasuke get captured or killed? He pushed those thoughts away for now. The two most threatening parts of the army were thankfully not very numerous. The first threat wore slightly altered armor, but what set them apart was the feathered cloak they wore. They were easily at the same level as his best Jainin, if not stronger, and they seemed to possess extremely powerful bloodlines. One of them was currently sending his army into the sky with simple gestures, only for them to plummet back down with lethal velocity. The last threat were the monstrous crows, wingless and three-eyed. They were fast, strong, and were shooting explosive beams all over the battlefield, wiping out entire squads. So far, his shinobi were being pushed back. The lack of experience in large-scale battles and poor cohesion meant that they were not making use of their numbers advantage, instead trying to rely on individual strength. Orochimaru clicked his tongue in annoyance. How inconvenient. Kabuto, summon the snakes, all of them. He commanded. And once you are done, get the mortars, gas, Formula 16T. Kabuto nodded and quickly bit his thumb, drawing blood before slamming it into the ground. Summoning Jutsu. A cloud of smoke appeared, and when it cleared, he and Kabuto were left standing behind a massive snake. Kabuto disappeared in a body flicker, leaving Orochimaru alone. Orochimaru saw him summon another snake on the other side of the battlefield. Manda, please eat anyone with a white mask. The giant snake hissed in annoyance but complied regardless. Good, he had no time to discipline Manda. As useful as the big beast was, it was far too proud sometimes. Manda rushed forwards, slamming himself into the enemy lines. The enemy combatants quickly responded by scattering. The one with the gravity ability and one of the crow beasts moved in tandem, launching themselves towards Manda. Orochimaru ignored that fight and looked for a target, quickly finding an interesting one. A blonde-haired woman wielding a naginata. She was cutting her way through shinobi left and right, her weapon quite literally flowing like water. Was that also one of the odd abilities or something inherent to the weapon? If his thoughts were correct, then she was a middle-ranked member due to her uniform, a good first target. Orochimaru reached into his mouth and pulled out his sword, Kusanagi. With a simple body flicker, Orochimaru stabbed at the woman's heart from her side. But his sword was knocked off course by a very recognizable blade being thrown into Kusanaga's path, turning a sure kill into a deep cut across the woman's ribs. He narrowly dodged a second sword, identical to the first, by jumping backwards. Hello there, Orochimaru. Zabuza Momokai greeted cheerfully, a bloodthirsty grin on his face. Orochimaru's eyes flicked from the blade in Zabuza's hand to the one now embedded into the ground, but as he was looking, the one that was thrown disappeared, not in a puff of smoke, just into thin air. Zabuza-sama. The woman shakily lifted her naginata. But she was stopped by Zabuza. Shut it, medic. Now. He growled out. The woman snapped her mouth shut and unsteadily vanished into a body flicker. Orochimaru looked around, seeing that everyone around them had cleared out, leaving the two of them alone. My, how unusual seeing you here, Zabuza-kun. He responded pleasantly. Last I heard, you were running around the elemental nations like a stray dog. That was completely false. He knew exactly where Zabuza had been in the last year, but he had learned early on that prodding at a person usually resulted in interesting information leaking out. The man let out a mocking laugh. Ah, well, Sometimes dogs find themselves an owner. Expected but disappointing, Zabuza was reputed to be a perfect example of what a shinobi was supposed to be, before his defection. Of course, Orochimaru knew that the peak of shinobi was much higher than some random A-class missing nin. He raised Kusanagi and rushed forward. He swung out with some casual slashes, testing Zabuza's reaction speed, but he got slightly confused when Zabuza barely dodged one of the slashes. He should have been able to dodge that. The blade grazed his skin, but as it touched it, slightly transparent scales erupted across Zabuza's arm. The sword cut into them, but an already light wound was turned superficial. Ah, testing his defenses against my strikes? Interesting, another odd ability. Orochimaru could not help but be excited. Even if he lost the most of his men today, it might be worth it. The sheer breadth of variety on display across the Order's forces was fascinating. He jumped backwards and let out a chuckle. Oh, how exciting! He said pleasantly. You and yours are fascinating, Zabuza-kun. Zabuza responded by raising his sword. I've heard much about the legendary Sannin Orochimaru, but I think I might be disappointed. Zabuza taunted lightly. I guess you're really not up to par with your reputation in that broken body, hey. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes. How did they know? But he kept his smile plastered onto his face and prepared for another strike. If Zabuza thought he needed hand seals to kill him, then Orochimaru was happy to educate him. Chapter 56, The Cardinal Hideouts. In the middle of the sea, on a small island surrounded by an uncaring ocean, 3 people were raised from darkness, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. They stood there silently for a moment before turning to each other. All had identical featureless masks, one wearing a dark cloak made of feathers. Where? Asked the cloaked figure. Northwest. Answered one of the others. 20 meters, she's running. With a body flicker, all of them were gone. Karin was running, her heart racing as she desperately tried to put some distance between herself and the thing chasing her. But it was right above her, she just had to get to the barracks, then she could hide behind the grunts. She really regretted pestering Orochimaru for a chance to prove herself. She would be much safer next to the snake summoner. But suddenly, the thing expanded, and the 3 presences sank into what she knew was rock. From the ceiling in front of her, a black sphere emerged, landing in front of her. It shrank into a human-sized form, cloaked in feathers, 2 others next to it, these ones normal humans. Karin slid to a halt. As a Templar of the Order, I ask you to surrender. The thing said politely. Karin gulped. It sounded human, but she could see the truth with her mind's eye. Behind the facade of humanity, at the center of its chakra, there was hunger, bottomless hunger. It wasn't human. It couldn't be human. The left one stepped forward, a woman, noticing her fear. Please surrender, I promise nothing will happen to you. Karin could feel that she was being honest, but she still hesitated. What do you want with me? She asked nervously. And why should I surrender? Your sensory abilities could greatly complicate our plan to eradicate this place. The cloaked figure explained patiently. If we did not target you first, you could easily alert everyone here and cause unnecessary chaos, as well as organize some semblance of a defense. Karin cursed in her mind. She hated that he was right, and she tried very hard to ignore the fact that they knew about her ability. That meant they knew exactly who she was, where to find her, and had hunted her down immediately. This is also why you are being offered a chance to surrender, since a fight would likely also alert the rest of the base. The woman interrupted her thoughts. Please cooperate, it would make everything less troublesome. Karin weighed her options, but considering that from the feel of their chakra, they were all stronger than her, and the fact that one of them was a, whatever that thing was. I surrender. She stammered out. Excellent. The cloaked figure said pleasantly. You 2 stay here and watch over her, I will clear out this section of the compound. Both saluted in perfect sync. As you command, Lord Templar. With that, the cloaked figure rushed into the distance, leaving Karin with the 2 masked humans. They stood there quietly. Karin felt as the so-called Templar got close to someone, the void inside them expanded, covering the person. This time when it retreated, there was no one there. She shivered. How horrifying! She nervously waited as the Templar slowly and carefully devoured everyone in the prison, leaving only her and the prisoners alive. Yugo felt scared. There was a lot of screaming happening outside. It made him want to scream too. And hurt things. He curled up on himself. He tried humming to calm himself down. It didn't work. Why did Kimimaro have to leave? He wanted Kimimaro to come back, he hated being alone. There was another scream, the urge to kill increased, he grit his teeth and closed his eyes, trying to ignore it. Then a door opened. His eyes snapped open, sclera turned black, yellow pupils locked onto the thing standing outside the doorway, anger colored his face as he jumped towards the intruder. Only for a clawed hand to slam him into the ground, crushing the stone beneath him. Yugo's eyes turned back to normal, his breath was knocked out of him. Ah, what a pitiable child! A voice said calmly. If it wasn't for the corruption deep inside you, I would say that you are very pure. Yugo tilted his head up, looking at the thing holding him down. It had a crow's head with 3 shining golden eyes, all of them staring at him. Be not afraid. It spoke softly. Your pain has been heard by the watcher above. It lifted its hand, and Yugo slowly stood up, only slightly wary. I am Shun, 5th born of the Watcher, and I have come to offer you a path. Yugo tilted his head in confusion, he didn't know what was happening, but for some reason, the bird thing didn't make him angry. What kind of path? He asked quietly. A path of peace. Shun said gently. If you would accept, I offer it to you, an escape from this torment you carry. Do you promise? Shun nodded. Yes, I promise. Yugo nodded after a moment of silence. Then. I want to go on that path. Shun let out a chirp. Wonderful, child, you are now my disciple, come along. The bird thing reached out a clawed hand, Yugo's hand wrapping around a single clawed finger as they walked away. Yugo ignored the bodies. He didn't really understand what was going on, but he liked Shun, maybe being his disciple would be nice? Suijutsu swung down with his stolen sword, aiming at a masked fucker's neck. He had no idea what was going on, so he just started swinging at everything. But before his attack could land, the sword was knocked away by another blade. These assholes were pretty good. You're pretty good for a midget. He commented casually, letting a slash cut into him without effect. It didn't do much to his water-like body. But not better than me. His opponent responded by twisting out of the way of a downward swing, in the same motion, stabbing into Suijutsu's stomach. Which, again, didn't do much. Fuck off, dipshit. The midget responded, tone annoyed. Why are you even fighting? Intel said you were not part of Orochimaru's little band of idiots. Het, because he felt like it and because he wanted to kill someone. What was she? Stupid? He grinned at the girl cockily. I dunno, maybe cause I felt like it. He asked, slightly mocking. She growled in annoyance, trying to stab him with her pointy stick some more, but all she was doing was stabbing a puddle. You are so fucking lucky that I'm shit at lightning release. She muttered to herself. That sounds like loser talk. He laughed, sending out a water gun jutsu from his mouth. She dodged by jumping backwards. Then they were interrupted by another masked freak appearing next to them. This one was wearing a feathered cloak. Initiate Rin, could you explain why you haven't dealt with the Hazuki? The new guy said. Normally Suijutsu would have made a joke, he recognized that tone, it was the if you had done what I said then we wouldn't be in this mess voice, his brother used to use it all the time. But this guy was dangerous. He just turns into water every time I hit him. The girl whined. I can't kill someone who doesn't have solid organs. The cloaked guy sighed, before speaking again. You were informed at least twice that learning basic jutsu of each element was highly advised, this is your own fault. He lectured. I will inform Lord Zabuza of this if you do not manage to fix this. Wait, Zabuza? Like, Demon of the Mist Zabuza? His eyes widened a bit in surprise. Oh hey, I thought I saw some familiar moves in your style, you guys work with Zabuza-senpai? He asked curiously. Is he here? Can I kill him? They both turned to stare at him silently for a moment. Boy, Zabuza would kill you in seconds. The cloaked guy finally answered after a short pause. Are you insane? Suijutsu scoffed and pointed a thumb towards his chest. I'm the future master of all 7 swords of Kiri, dumbass. He introduced proudly. I've got nothing to fear from him. Both of them were silent again, before they started talking like he wasn't even there. I think Orochimaru's experiments have made him mad. The cloaked guy said. I agree, don't worry. The order has many mind healers that can help you out with whatever is happening to your brain. The girl comforted Suijutsu kindly. Just hold on a little longer. Wow, fuck her. Fuck off! I'm not crazy! He shouted angrily. I'll show you! With a roar, he rushed forward, his arm swelling grotesquely as he swung it at the cloaked guy's neck. It was parried, the blade being knocked upwards by a kick, the sword flew over both of their heads and stabbed into the wall next to them. He didn't get a chance to recover, a kick slammed into his stomach, sending him skidding back until his back hit a wall. His stomach hurt, why had that kick hit him? He examined the guy more closely, only to see one hand shaped into a horse seal, one-handed hand seal? That explained why this guy felt dangerous. But before he could start planning around this new information, 7 other arms folded out from the cloak. Oh! Oh! The cloaked man started weaving one-handed seals with all 8 hands, causing Suijutsu to pale. Fuck no! He turned tail and ran. He didn't get very far before a wall of jutsu hit him in the back, lightning and fire and wind smashing him into a wall. Chapter 57, The Snake vs the Demon. Orochimaru dodged another swing from Zabuza's Kyubikaribch copy, annoyance building within him. He was being stalled, it was clear. He reassessed the objective of the Order's forces. They wanted to eradicate Otogakuer, slowly and methodically. He did not like that. At the end of the day, while Otogakuer was replaceable, it would be extremely inconvenient for him to rebuild it again. Still, Kabuto should be back soon, that should turn the tides somewhat, even if it might kill a good portion of his men. His sword flicked out, aiming for Zabuza's heart, only for the swordsman to knock it off course with a downward swing. Orochimaru's arm twisted unnaturally, making sure the tip was pointed towards Zabuza's thigh, quickly channeling chakra into Kusanagi, its blade stabbed into Zabuza's leg. He had to dodge immediately as the executioner's blade came swinging at him, this time an upward arc aiming for his neck. Water gathered around Zabuza's wound, healing it in the time it took Orochimaru to find another opening. How annoying, he noted. This fight was a complete waste of time. You are pretty annoying to fight, you know. Zabuza said casually, seemingly having fun. I wonder how human you really are beneath that pale skin of yours. Perhaps if Orochimaru was interrupted by a second Zabuza bursting out from the ground behind him, swinging his blade upwards. Orochimaru barely managed to dodge, his arm getting sliced off as he jumped backwards. A shadow clone? Snakes burst out of his stump, reforming his lost limb in half a second. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he slashed apart the shadow clone, it dispelled in a puff of smoke. As they were fighting, Kabuto must have finished summoning all the snakes, because from far away, Orochimaru heard low bangs echoing across the battlefield. Looks like your forces will soon die, Zabuza-kun. Orochimaru taunted. I wonder how many people will be able to escape on time. Zabuza looked out into the distance for a moment. High above the Order's forces, dozens of large spheres were falling towards them. The Order responded quickly, kunao, arrows and jutsu intercepted them, but as the orbs exploded, clouds of poison covered the sky, slowly falling down. Do you think we would not have prepared for gas? Zabuza asked plainly. We have prepared for everything, Orochimaru. Dozens of Order members started weaving hand seals together, each using wind release to clear the skies, quickly blowing the poison into the general direction of Otogakuer. How foolish, to think you can prepare for everything. Orochimaru said. There are many things you cannot expect. As the poison washed over the Otogakuer army, the shinobi didn't scream in pain, instead they screamed with fury, their muscles bulging as their strength grew. That was Formula 16T, if you lacked the pre-injected antibodies, then it acted as a simple nerve agent, causing seizures and eventual death. But for those who had been prepared, it enhanced strength, speed and most importantly, reaction speed by up to 40%. It will kill approximately 30% of his forces in a day or two, but that was an acceptable price, in Orochimaru's opinion. The Otogakuer army retreated into the cloud of poison, taking advantage of the fact that the Order forces could not fight them inside of it without dying to it. Probably true, but this isn't one of them. Zabuza grinned beneath his mask. Look up, snake. Orochimaru glanced up, only to see clouds, nothing else. He narrowed his eyes in suspicion. He didn't have to wonder for long, as out of the clouds descended 20 ice dragons, all aimed at his shinobi. His expression turned sour, he gathered his chakra and rushed towards his men with a body flicker, a double Rashman should be enough. Zabuza watched as Orochimaru ran, he was glad that their planning worked out, they, of course, hadn't planned for this exact scenario, but close enough. Haku had been hiding in clouds with his dragon constructs sealed inside scrolls, waiting for the enemy to gather or retreat into a single location before raining death upon them. And the possibility of poison and gas was brought up, which is why all the initiates knew wind jutsu. It was a basic requirement for being part of the main force. But Orochimaru was about to leave his range, so he should get started quickly. He smacked his hands together with a clap, he focused on the blessing deep within himself, and for the first time since he had gotten it, he activated it. To everyone else, Orochimaru and Zabuza disappeared from the world. Months earlier. Simply walk into the main chamber. Zabuza narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Why was this fucking crow always giving him headaches? Did he like doing that? That's it? He asked plainly. That's the test. Yes, as far as I have been informed, that is what you must do. Zabuza let out a huff but still followed the order, walking down the hallways of this shrine, finally stopping at a large door. He pushed it open and walked inside. It was completely dark. When he stepped inside, the door slowly closed behind him. He was left alone in pitch-black darkness for a few seconds, until suddenly, thousands of stars ignited around him. This again, he still vividly remembered the first and only meeting he had with the Watcher. The same pressure descended upon him, but maybe due to his increased strength, or his familiarity with the Watcher's power from his blessings, it wasn't as suffocating this time. The Watcher appeared in the distance, staring directly at him. The Watcher approached Zabuza at a slow pace, stopping in front of him, looming over Zabuza. And then, the Watcher shrank. His body compressed into a much smaller form, a human-sized one, standing barely taller than Zabuza himself. Zabuza Mamakai. He spoke, his voice still that impossible sound, whereas before it shook reality itself, now it just shook his bones. I offer you a choice. Zabuza couldn't help but be wary. This was not what he was expecting when he was told he might be getting a promotion. What choice? He asked cautiously. You can receive a normal blessing, similar to those already bestowed upon you. That sounded pretty good. Or you can become my first Templar. His expectations were instantly shattered. He knew what a Templar was. It was the highest rank that a member of the military order could hold. None were good enough yet to ascend to that rank. So, why was the Watcher offering this to him? While he was the head of the military wing, he always expected it to be a temporary position. One day an acolyte would earn a Templar's position, and Zabuza would step down from leadership. He simply didn't worship the Watcher, he acknowledged him as a god, but never participated in the ceremonies or prayers. Why? He blurted out, without thinking. Why me? The Watcher stood silently for a moment. Follow. Without another word, the Watcher turned around and walked into the starry void. Zabuza quickly followed him as he walked. He just now noticed they were technically standing on nothing, but as they walked, from the darkness beneath him rose stone. Every step he took brought up more of it, until they were walking on a large circular platform. They continued on silently, before finally, they reached the edges of the platform. The Watcher simply sat down on the ledge, tapping the stone to his side, signaling Zabuza to sit down next to him. Zabuza hesitantly walked over and was stunned by the view before him. Below them floated the world itself, blue and green, painted with white clouds. He could recognize the elemental nations anywhere. He carefully sat down next to the Watcher, noticing they were actually on a massive tower. What do you think? The Watcher asked plainly. It took Zabuza a moment to realize that the question had asked, taken by the view in front of him. It's so very small. He wasn't talking about the planet itself, he was talking about the land of waves, the land of water. All of them, even the whole elemental nations felt tiny. Yes. The Watcher agreed. It is easy to feel big when standing in small ponds. Let me show something else. A vision appeared, of a baby being born, to a small family, poor but happy, the baby childhood passing in seconds. Zabuza saw him become a man and get married. He watched as he plowed a field, then again, and again and again, interspersed with scene from his life, a failed romance, a good friendship, a drunken brawl at a bar, until finally, on a sunny day, the man's heart gave out, and he died right there in the field he spent years taking care of. More scenes appeared around them, first a handful, then hundreds, then thousands, people being born, dying. It became too much for Zabuza to even remotely follow. Does it still feel small? The tens of thousands of people that have lived and are living in my lands. The Watcher asked, the question ringing out through the sea of images surrounding them, many overlapping and continuing without stop. Zabuza stared silently, taking it all in, watching lives blink by in seconds. I suppose it's bigger than I thought. He answered eventually. Yes. The Watcher agreed calmly. I am not all-powerful, or all-knowing, my power is vast, I could sink the land of waves into a watery abyss, but there will always be a life that slips through my hands. The Watcher waved his hand again and the visions faded away, leaving the two of them staring at the world itself. If I cannot protect all of them, then I will shape a force that can. The Watcher turned to look Zabuza in the eyes. You are already part of this force, you lead it, guide it. But, you still distance yourself from it. You see yourself as separate, unwilling to put your entire self into it. Zabuza frowned, that was closer to the truth than he liked. He had pledged his loyalty to Haruka, but even now, months later, he still saw himself as separate from the true worshippers. He saw the Watcher's will as his boss, a scary boss that could pull some absolute bullshit out of thin air, but still a boss. I do not fault you for this. The Watcher interrupted his thoughts. But your lack of faith is not an issue, faith does not determine if you are capable of protecting my people. Frown still on his face, Zabuza spoke up. I'm not a protector, I'm a killer, and you know that. Zabuza wasn't ashamed of what he was, he enjoyed it, the thrill of battle and the satisfaction of placing his life against an enemy, knowing that one of them would die. Killing was what he was doing in the earliest memory he remembered, and it would be the thing he was doing when he breathed his last. The Watcher tilted his head. You misunderstand, in a kinder world, a protector would not be a killer, but we do not live in a kind world. The Watcher stood up from where he was sitting. This world is seeped in blood, outside my lands, violence is abundant, you know this truth well. The Watcher extended his hand to Zabuza, offering to help him stand up. I do not ask you to change yourself into something you are not, I ask you to kill, cut down those standing in our path, protect the world I am building by destroying those who would see it burn. The Watcher's tone shifted, the stars within his void flesh brightened, around them, the darkness grew deeper. If this world cannot accept my kindness, then I shall give it my wrath, I will feed it blood and bodies until it is sick of them. And you can be the one who makes it so. Zabuza had forgotten that the Watcher was not human, no matter how much he acted like it, but the being before him wasn't. The pressure that descended upon him reminded him of exactly what was looking at him. Zabuza made his decision. Chapter 58, Zabuza in the Bloody Mist PT1. Orochimaru's body flicker was interrupted as he was surrounded by red mist. He quickly gathered the chakra and used a simple wind release, great breakthrough to clear the surrounding area. It did not work, his jutsu disappeared into the mist, the space cleared being filled in by red mist instantly, and most interestingly enough, he could not hear any of the surrounding battle taking place. There was dead silence. He instantly tried every method of dispelling genjutsu, ending in a burst of chakra that stirred the surrounding mist, but he was still within the unknown jutsu. For the first time since the fight started, Orochimaru felt genuine worry, either this was a genjutsu on par with Itaka's, or he was actually moved somewhere different, which would make it an unknown space-time jutsu. Did you think I would just let you leave? A voice asked from behind him. Orochimaru jumped and turned around in a split second, only to see nothing behind him. The mist lightened, and he saw Zabuza standing in the distance, sword resting on his shoulder. Around Zabuza figures emerged from the red mist, humanoid in shape, but made from the same mist they walked out of, only visible due to the mist surrounding them being lighter than their bodies. Each one raised their arms, copies of Kyubikaribge suddenly materializing within their hands. Orochimaru instantly understood the implications, assuming Zabuza voluntarily thinned the mist to intimidate him, he could thicken it again, making these clones invisible, only detectable due to their weapons. If their swords were as sharp as the original, then this could be trouble. Every single misty reflection you see here is someone I killed in my life. Zabuza explained. We both stand on a mountain of corpses, as all good shinobi do. That was an interesting ability if Zabuza was being literal, Orochimaru thought, but still not useful for figuring out how to escape. I always wondered how big mine was, I knew I had killed a lot, but I never bothered to keep count. Zabuza mused to himself, the mist thickened again, rising from the ground. Do you know how many people I've killed? Zabuza asked casually. The bloody mist thickened even further, obscuring anything farther than a meter away. 813. Zabuza's voice echoed around him. Survive them all. A blade swung out from the red fog, Orochimaru ducked beneath it, another swing came from behind him, he rolled forward, avoiding it. Orochimaru extended Kusanagi and slashed behind him, his blade passing through the faint humanoid outline without effect. Just like the Hozuki clan then, small attacks simply passed through them. Orochimaru analyzed the situation calmly. He breathed in and spat out a simple water bullet at another mist clone. It managed to block the attack with its sword but was pushed back a few meters. Water was effective then, or it would not have blocked it. That was good information, but he still had more elements to test. The fight descended into a dance of dodges and quick tests, each element only giving him a better understanding of the technique Zabuza was using. Orochimaru was dissecting the ability apart, piece by piece. Every wound sustained by Orochimaru was healed, every mist clone he managed to destroy was replaced with another. After a while, it was clear that he would not be winning this battle. At least, not like this. Technically any element was effective, but fire, wind and water were the most cost-efficient. The least chakra for the most range. His inability to use large-scale jutsu was severely limiting his effectiveness, but he was a Sunin, and he was the strongest out of them for a reason. He didn't need seals to fight. He needed a few seconds to prepare, so he jumped upwards. Unsurprisingly, there was more mist above him. Breathing in deeply, his lungs expanded beyond a normal human's capacity. Fire release, great fire annihilation. A massive stream of flame poured out from his mouth, instantly evaporating the mist around him. He spun around to try and burn as much of the clones away as possible. But he only heard the clatter of 7 swords hitting the ground. If he had less control over his body, he would have frowned. Was the show Zabuza put on a bluff? Or had the rest held back just in case Orochimaru used something like this? But he did not let any of his doubts show on his face, instead smiling pleasantly. That's 7 more, Zabuza-kun, only 775 left to go. He said sweetly. What does this achieve? Are you just wasting time? Zabuza was silent, another blade emerging from the mist, almost cutting Orochimaru in half vertically. He barely twisted out of the way, losing his arm instead. Orochimaru almost hissed. This was annoying. He quickly grabbed his arm out of the air and attached it to himself again. He used the body flicker to throw himself forwards, dodging every silent attack he could, healing any wound he took. When he had the chance, he used jutsu to thin the ranks. But one body flicker after another lead him nowhere. The only thing surrounding him was red mist, endless and unchanging. No matter how far he ran or jumped, he was always surrounded by misty reflections trying to cut him down. It was a fruitless effort. After running for what must have been half a kilometer, Orochimaru stopped. He had to change plans. Zabuza was hiding too well, not a single clue of where he was, as expected from a master of silent killing. So he had to trust the little information he had got and kill the rest of the misty reflections as efficiently as possible. Another sword lashed out, this time from above. Orochimaru parried the strike and spat out a great fireball, as big as the attacker, evaporating him. Before the now ownerless sword hit the ground, another struck at Orochimaru's side, which he jumped over. 2 more came in from behind. He dodged one by jumping over it, but the second sliced his leg off, causing him to stumble. It took 1.2 seconds for him to regenerate his leg. Orochimaru lost himself in the fight, now a contest of who would break first, Zabuza's strange jutsu or Orochimaru's stamina and chakra. Chapter 59, Zabuza in the Bloody Mist PT2. 10. 50. 100. 150. 200. Orochimaru kept count, every clone that fell to his attacks being tallied carefully in his mind. They were weaker than him individually, but their almost undetectable attacks and sheer numbers were overwhelming. Orochimaru was getting desperate. He tried riskier tactics, using jutsu with more range, setting up a killing field with his kunao and lightning jutsu, creating traps with explosive seals. He even tried summoning, hoping to overwhelm Zabuza's army with his own, but the summoning failed immediately, confirming that this was some sort of space-time jutsu. He was getting angry. He refused to die here, killed by someone like Zabuza, surrounded by red mist so thick that he could not see anything but the blade aiming for his flesh. But he saw no way out. He could not run, he could not find Zabuza due to the mist, he could not outlast the endless horde. He was missing half his chakra and he still had 2/3 to go if Zabuza said the truth. He knew the cold calculus of survival, and this fight did not seem winnable for him. But he had one final option. Orochimaru's body bulged, his skin twisting and growing. A sword cut off his head, another cut his body in half. But it was already too late. His body exploded. 8 white snakes burst out of his back, quickly growing into massive size. They all roared at the same time, before lunging into the misty horde, each head destroying a reflection in a single bite or strike. They were bigger than even Manda. Orochimaru knew this would destabilize his body deeply, but at this moment he felt like that was a price worth paying. The now 8-headed Orochimaru was rampaging through the red mist, slaughtering reflections left and right, completely unstoppable by them, the misty blades simply too small to wound him deeply. Zabuza watched as Orochimaru's gigantic transformation raged across his battlefield. He had hoped that from all the intel that was not confirmed, the 8 branches technique would be among those that weren't true, but unfortunately, Orochimaru was able and willing to use it if pushed too far. He had hoped this would be an easy victory, just slowly draining Orochimaru of his chakra until Zabuza could cut him into pieces and burn them in a pyre. Orochimaru had impressed him, as much as it frustrated him to say, if it was the Zabuza from a year ago he would have been dismantled in seconds. Even his current self was not enough to kill him without his bloody mist. Even if he went for a mutual kill, the S-rank shinobi could just regenerate from anything besides total destruction. And this Orochimaru was crippled, lacking the ability to use hand seals, something a vast majority of shinobi considered essential for fighting. Yet he still killed the equivalent of 212 Jonin-level fighters single-handedly. How insane, how inhuman, Zabuza thought with awe. This was what the peak of the shinobi world looked like. It filled him with determination. But the respect he felt would not stop him from doing his job. He bit his thumb and drew blood before slamming it onto the ground. Summoning Jutsu. A puff of white smoke later, a crow emerged from the smoke. It quickly saluted him. "Greetings, Lord Zabuza." It caught at him. "Report." Zabuza ordered bluntly. "The battle is progressing well. The enemy has retreated inside Otagakure after Lord Haku routed them. We are clearing the poisonous gas right now." The crow quickly reported. Zabuza really wished all Crow clan's members were this concise. "Tell them to clear out an area around where I was last seen, a large area, leave Otagakure open if needed, and be quick about it." The crow nodded quickly. "Understood, Lord Zabuza." And with that, it vanished in another burst of smoke. Zabuza's blessing had 2 parts. One was the one he had just used, the Army of Reflections. He was telling the truth to Orochimaru, there really were 813 of them, and you did have to kill them all to end the ability. This space was outside of the normal world. It wasn't technically that big, only a couple of kilometers wide sphere, but it was endless. Walking to one side just mean you would arrive at the same side you came from, making it impossible to run away. It also blocked summoning or any other space-time ninjutsu that he didn't allow, leaving the enemies facing his army alone. With the fact that all the reflections were as skilled as him and the mist was endless, it was a slaughtering ground for everyone that was S-rank. But it had a second part, something that would allow him to compete with tailed beasts and summoning bosses, something that closed the gap between himself and even cage-level fighters. The problem was that if he used it, this space would collapse, transporting everyone inside back to the real world. So now he waited. He would give the army 3 minutes to evacuate before he and Orochimaru started their final fight. He looked around the endless bloody mist around him, as well as at the towering form of Orochimaru. Even as his clone army fell one by one, he knew without his blessings he was no match, but let's see if with them, he could fight in the realm of legends. 3 minutes later. Zabuza counted down the last second. Orochimaru was still raging about, killing everything he saw with ease. He clapped his hands together, and red mist flowed into him, slow at first, but then faster and faster, like a dam breaking. It flowed into his body started growing, feeding on the bloody mist, the misty reflection fading into the flowing stream of red. The mist thinned enough that the realm collapsed, and they were now back in the real world. Orochimaru stopped, his head scanning the horizon. Near them was the entrance of Otagakure, dozens of shinobi fortifying it, in the distance and surrounding them was the order. But he wasn't done yet. The mist continued flowing into him, wrapping around him like a cocoon before finally stopping. With a rippling sound, the cocoon broke, revealing Zabuza. He stood as tall as Orochimaru, red mist wrapping around him, forming into a second skin. His face was obscured, the only thing visible being his red glowing eyes. In his hand rested a titanic Kyubikaribge dripping blood. Divine technique, demon of the bloody mist. His voice shook the air. He lifted his sword, and for the final time, pointed it at Orochimaru. He was answered by 8 roars. Chapter 60, Zabuza, Demon of the Bloody Mist. Haku watched as his master, mentor, father figure fought Orochimaru. He was filled with worry. This was a fight on a scale he had never experienced before. his tactic of preparing ice dragons and then animating seemed so invincible earlier today. But now, the scale of this fight was insane. Could these men really be called shinobi anymore? Was this what the wars fought in the past looked like? He had been so happy when Hikari played her little joke and wrote him in as Zabuza's adopted son in the paperwork. And now maybe Zabuza might die. A giant sword lashed out, fast and strong enough to cut into a mountain and decapitated one head. In retaliation, 2 more bit down on the arm, holding it in place as the other head spit flames and wind at Zabuza's face, sending him crashing backwards. Haku clenched his fist as he watched the back and forth. He wasn't going to idly stand by. I'm going to try and help, stay safe, and don't get involved unless you are confident you make a difference. He instructed the people around him, who nodded and saluted him. He disappeared in a swirl of snow. He would need a good amount of space for his preparations. Sadeko observed the battle from above, floating high in the sky. She was considering her options. Orochimaru had shown remarkable resilience. If she did not deal a great wound, then he would simply heal from it. So her best option was a full power attack. If he lived, it should give an opening to Lord Zabuza to finish him off. They did not need to kill him, just incapacitate him enough so they could attack freely until his regeneration was overwhelmed. So she extended her hands, focusing deeply on the space beneath her. She should be able to manage a good hit before she was crippled, and the chances of her dying as long as she did not push herself was negligible. She angled herself in such a way that her back was facing to the biggest concentration of order members. Space compressed as she focused on it. Compress. Gravity began to, well. Compress. Compress. Air distorted as reality struggled against her will. It wanted to return to the shape it once was, but Sadeko ignored its wants. Compress. She felt a trickle of blood drip down her nose, but she could still continue. Anything besides permanent damage was acceptable. Compress. The distortion was visible now. An opaque disc floated below her. Her head started hurting and her breathing was getting heavy. She took a second to examine her condition. She still could layer another one. Compress. Her vision turned red from the blood vessels in her eyes bursting. There was a limit to her blessing. It needed fuel after all, and her soul only had so much to give. It seems like this was her limit. Acceptable. She layered a clock of gravity around her shoulders and put a hand to her chest, the other pointing at Orochimaru. She made sure that she was in the correct position. If she missed, that would be unfortunate. Fall. She was launched backwards, her body shut down, her last vision being Orochimaru getting hit by the full force of her ability. It cratered the ground, shaking the whole valley with its power. Even Zabuza stumbled, but Orochimaru suffered the worst of it. Blood burst out of every orifice as his giant body was crushed, sinking into the earth. She landed safely on the ground, her body cushioned by gravity. The surrounding order members quickly rushed over, taking her away to somewhere safe. Her part in this fight was done. Zabuza rushed forward, recovering from the unexpected attack faster than Orochimaru did. Sadeko really outdid herself today. Orochimaru was twitching, his healing quickly healing his broken bones. But Zabuza was not interested in waiting. He jumped. Kubikaribch crashed down onto the prone Orochimaru, 2 heads decapitated in a single stroke, enough blood to form a river pouring out from the stumps. A snake shakily raised itself up and tried to bite him, but an upward swing sent it flying into the forest, disappearing into the distance. The last 4 heads recovered enough to strike at once, one trying to bite down on Zabuza's neck, while 2 others went for his arms. The 4th breathed in deeply. It aimed directly at Zabuza. He tried to strike at it, but the fangs clamping down on him restricted his movements. But the moment the lightning left the head's mouth, a gigantic ice construct slammed into its side, redirecting it. A mountain in the distance exploded under the force of the lightning breath. Zabuza smiled beneath his misty skin. The ice dragons Haku sculpted were very recognizable to him. He had haphazardly fused them together into a bigger version, a dragon made of dragons. It silently bit down on the lightning-spewing head. Zabuza used that chance to rip his sword arm free. He was going to regret that later as the fangs tore at his flesh, but for now, he swung, cutting off another head. The ice dragon wrapped around Orochimaru's neck, keeping it from attacking further. With only 3 heads left, he could end it now. The chances of him missing were almost 0. He had not wanted to gamble before, but with the help from Haku and Sadeko, this should be the end. The mist covering his body flowed around Kubikaribch, leaving him a mortal man again. He fell out of Orochimaru's jaws, the red mist condensed into blood, coating the blade. He slashed. A wave of blood followed his strike. Slicing through flesh and bone with ease, cutting all the remaining heads, Orochimaru's gigantic body collapsed completely, finally defeated. Zabuza landed, one of his arms had deep rents from when he ripped it out of Orochimaru's jaw, the other and his neck had puncture wounds, his chest was burned, but he had won. Zabuza-sama. He turned to see Haku landing on the ground behind him, looking worried. Are you okay? He grunted, he would live. Take me to the medics, and tell the army to seal everything, set up a perimeter, Orochimaru could still be alive, so make sure not a single worm escapes. Haku quickly nodded, forming a hand seal, a single copy popped up and ran towards the order members. Haku himself gently picked up Zabuza, running towards the healers. Zabuza relaxed, the recovery was going to be a bitch and a half, but he was satisfied.
Thanks for listening.